Mr. Chair, we're now live.
Thank you, Clerk, and welcome everyone. Due to the COVID-19 emergency declaration, this GGC meeting is being held electronically and live streamed on the town's website. All members of council in attendance are participating by audio and video teleconference, and senior town staff are available throughout the meeting if council members have any questions on the agenda. For members of the public watching from home, please bear with us if we encounter any technical difficulties throughout this meeting. I'd like to call this meeting to order. And we are starting with any disclosure of pecuniary interest. There being none, thank you so much. Move on to the adoption of minutes. For the 3.1 regular minutes of September 14th, 2020, I need a mover for that. Moved by Councilor Bauer. All in favor? I should have asked if there was any questions. Any questions on that? There being none, all in favor, that passes. Thank you so much. Moving on to the adoption of minutes 3.2, closed session minutes, September 14th, 2020. Are there any questions? Regional Councilor.
No questions. I was moving it, Chair.
Okay, so moved by Regional Councilor Sterling Lee. Are there any questions?
We'd have to go in camera.
Sorry?
We'd have to go in camera if there's questions.
I understand because it's a closed session. All in favor? That carries. Thank you so much. Moving on to consent agenda items, which we have a few. Bear with me here. Starting off with a number of items have been pulled. So starting with 4.1, Mayor Collier and Regional Councilor Dyes have pulled it. We'll start with Mayor Collier. You have the floor, sir.
Can I move the remainder that hasn't been pulled?
Sorry, yes. All in favor for the remaining items? That passes. Thank you so much. Moving to 4.1, residential boulevard encroachments. Mayor Collier, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. And I'm very glad to see this come forward. This is something that one of the first things we did as a council when we first got elected in the fall of 2018 was have a stoppage put to all the approximately 250 outstanding actions that were in place to regarding boulevard widenings in order to have staff go and look at the issue that we're having, which is people living at home longer, kids living at home longer, multiple families, rental apartments, and just recognizing the fact that we needed to be able to create more parking on private property, get it off the street, and still comply, and still through a bylaw be able to maintain proper property standards and everything else. So I'm really glad to see this come forward. I did have a chance to go over this with Cassandra, and I think it's very well done. I just had one concern, and that is that I don't want to see this abused. While we need to recognize sorry, Cassandra, are you there?
Yes, I am.
Luciano? Okay, thank you. I don't want to make sure that this isn't abused. We've already given a 2-year moratorium to people just as a stay for now. But going forward, if we do allow exceptions, please tell me what are the repercussions if people still go outside the boundaries that we're setting with this item.
So right now, the way that we have it set up is that bylaws enforcement practices would continue the way, and perhaps the manager, through the chair, perhaps the manager of bylaw can speak a little bit further to exactly what would happen in the event of a contravention under the simple encroachments, which are those that are allowed as of right. But for those that are would be receiving a complex encroachment agreement, so they've gone through the application process and have been granted an encroachment agreement by the town. At this point, if they contravened any of those terms that are included in their agreement. So right now we've used the example of parking. So if parking is not permitted beyond a certain amount, which is the widened apron, anything beyond that, we've said, you're not allowed to park on that. At this point in time, we've made reference to any tickets or tows to be at the owner's expense, but we haven't particularly outlined specific enforcement practices in this policy, but perhaps I believe it would just go through the standard enforcement practice that we normally do. So perhaps Mr. Hannon can speak to that just to provide a little bit more clarity.
Okay, is Mr. Hannon here?
Through the chair, Mayor Collier, the process that would happen would be we would notify the individual, whether it was a simple encroachment or a contravention of the complex encroachment. They would have an opportunity to get into compliance with whatever was approved. If they didn't comply, then the town would go in and do the work on their behalf and bill back their property tax.
Okay. I guess the other, we've got approximately, I think, 250 matters in front of bylaw right now that are stayed for time being. So how you'll go through those, and any that are complex will be dealt with. And this, my understanding, is pretty similar to a committee of adjustment type thing. And that's why the fee is what the fee is, to be in line with committee of adjustment and minor variances.
Yes. Through the chair, in terms of there being a fee for those that are looking to proactively seek approval from the town to move forward, as well as having a forgiveness fee for those that have completed the work already without going through the town's process. So yes, in that sense, it is similar to the committee of adjustment process.
So if somebody goes through committee of adjustment and gets a minor variance and then doesn't comply with the minor variance, what happens? To the chair, as far as, probably to Mr. Hannon, as far as enforcement?
If they didn't comply, through the chair, sorry, if they didn't comply with the minor variance, then it doesn't exist and it would revert back to the original bylaw.
Okay, and that's, thank you for that. That's sort of where I'm going with this. So I would like to bring forward an amendment, Mr. Chair. I have sent it to the clerk. If Mr. Harris would be able to put that up. If not, I can read it. Well, I'll read it anyway. There. So that staff be directed to implement a zero ballot, and we'll call this number 5 in the recommendations. That staff be directed to implement a zero tolerance approach for contraventions of any executed complex encroachment agreement, including parking infractions, to result in the termination of the agreement by the town. And I'll just speak to it very quickly, Chair. This is in all effect a minor variance that we're allowing through a simplified process, but we are allowing a minor variance in that we're allowing people to modify their properties, encroach on town boulevards. And this is something that we do not need to do. And I just want to make it clear that if somebody does not comply, just the same as with if had they gone through a minor variance, for instance, a change of setback, encroachment, that type of thing, that the same rules would be applied. So if somebody does go through a complex and we do allow them a certain amount and they take an extra 5 feet, for instance, I want it to be known to them right up front while they're going through the process to get their complex agreement, that they know right up front that if they contravene this, if they go past this, if they disregard the bylaws that we're putting in place, that there will be repercussions. And I think it's only fair and fitting that we put that right in the rules, right in front of everybody, so there's no misunderstanding. So that's my amendment, and hopefully I can count on council support for that. Thank you, Chair.
So we continue taking questions, clerk, or should we speak to the amendment at this time?
Mr. Chair, the amendment is on the floor, so questions should be directed towards the amendment.
Okay, so that means Joanne Dies, if you can just hold off. Regional Councilor Lee, I'm assuming that your question is on the amendment. Okay, go ahead, sir.
So just not so much a question as a comment. I'm happy to support this amendment. It's, this whole report is just, it's unifying a standard across the town. So there's no more, oh, this person got this person got that, and it's consistent. And I think the wording of this amendment is consistent with that too. It's just we were all following the same amount of rules. If you're a member of this town, these are the rules, these are the punishments, and it's consistent. So happy to support that. Just through the town or through the excuse me, through the chair to I guess Ms. Cruciano. Does the amendment make sense to you from your point of view? And if it does, why wouldn't have that been included in your report, for example?
Through the chair, it certainly does make sense. And staff initially did not include sort of the zero tolerance approach because what we had included was just that the town does reserve the right as a very blanket statement that the town reserves the right to terminate an agreement at any time based on our own prerogatives. So that we felt was sufficient at the time. But if council's desire is to make it a bit more clear, set an expectation with residents that's a little bit more explicit up front. I think that's something that's quite reasonable, at least from my perspective. But perhaps there may be bylaw, and Mr. Hannon may have some other suggestions or thoughts based on the matter.
Through the chair to Mr. Hannon, then, is any feedback on the amendment? It sounds good from our point of view. I just want to make sure from a staff point of view it makes sense.
Through the chair, it means that staff wouldn't be waiting for an opportunity of receiving a complaint when it's identified that there's a violation of either the simple or the complex agreement. What we wouldn't know necessarily out on the road is that if somebody modified, we may not know firsthand as we're not regularly checking them.
Right.
We would verify at the time of approval that they were built as we outlined, but it also means that as soon as we are identified, we wouldn't be waiting for a complaint. We would go out and deal with it proactively.
Okay. Thank you for the answer, and thank you, Chair. Looking to support.
Thank you again.
Point of order, Chair.
Yes.
Just as further, this is only meant to deal with the complex, not the simple, which is stated in there. Mr. Hannon had said simple or complex. I intended this to be just to the complex agreements only.
Okay.
So the simple, if they are found to be contravention of the simple, then they have to go through the complex process, right?
Okay, if everyone, so on questions on the amendment, Regional Councilor Marilyn Crawford. I haven't forgotten about you, Joanne, but just we're on the amendment at this time.
I believe my question will be on the original motion. Sorry, Chair.
No problem. Lisa, Councilor Bauer, do you have a question on the amendment?
Yes, I do. Thank you, Chair.
Okay.
Happy to support this amendment. Just wondering, without it, what does that mean? If this was not contained as an amendment to the motion, what difference would that make to this encroachment report, I guess?
Through the chair, I would say that with this motion, it means that staff will not be waiting for complaints when it's identified in advance. We will take action as soon as it's realized there's a violation of the complex agreement.
Okay. So you will proactively be looking for these versus waiting for someone to complain?
Through the chair, we will proactively deal with it when it's been identified. So if staff recognize that there's been an extension of hardscaping that shouldn't have been, we would proactively deal with that. But we would also at times, we wouldn't be checking at them regularly. So it may need a complaint for us to bring it to staff's attention, but when identified, we will take action immediately.
Thank you.
Are there any more questions on the amendment? So moved by Mayor Collier that staff be directed to implement a zero tolerance approach for contraventions of any executed complex encroachment agreement, including parking infractions, to result in the termination of the agreement by the town. All in favor? That motion passes. The amendment passes. So now we're back into regular questions on the item. And next up is Regional Councilor Joanne Dice.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you to staff. Obviously, there are neighborhoods that are more challenged with respect to parking, maybe by reduced lot size, whatever the issues. Did we look at just like separating those and putting this type of encroachment policy forward for those specific areas? I know a lot of it's in the north.
Through the chair, initially when staff explored this, there were some conversations about localizing this to certain neighborhoods, but the concern that was identified at the time was that, making this a blanket approach, but in doing so in such a way that addresses issues that we find throughout the town. So when we think of these encroachments as, in some places in North Ajax, where we look at the very clear examples where there's, substantial landscaping alterations that have taken place, whereas in parts of South Ajax that may not be as easily visible. But we've found that there are cases of encroachments that are existing throughout town, all over the place. So things like a tree ring, for example, or something like an apron widening. And what we tried to do under the simple encroachments was try to be as permissive as possible while still being conscientious of the concerns that we would have about this about putting a program like this in place. So by permitting things like tree rings, apron widenings, and I think I wrote this policy or something. What is the third thing? And then soft landscaping, which is the planting of flowers and things like that. We see those kind of throughout town. So that being more, in staff's mind, focusing on a town wide, and then complex encroachments would, I think, if we plotted all of the cases on a map, I'm sure we'd see them it predominantly in certain neighborhoods in town. But from an enforcement perspective and from a tracking perspective, making the criteria clear across the entire town consistently was something that staff decided was or should be a priority.
Did we also look at neighborhoods that were in floodplains or have had issues prior to flooding on the street, like Lori? There's some neighborhoods that are prone to that. And when you talk about the complex encroachments, paving the boulevard and paving some of your front lawn, that can really increase the risk of flooding because you've got more runoff. So did we look at that also?
So through the chair, the way that we had set up the process for once an application is received, for some of that more complex hardscaping and paving that we had that would be of concern for something like flooding, we do have a process in place that when an application is received by staff, that it is reviewed by engineering, by operations, by planning, and by transportation to take a really close look at considerations like that. And we have it explicitly outlined that the town has the ability and the discretion to permit a complex encroachment or to not. So in the event that they're, in a potential case where there may be a street that is prone to flooding, or if there are any concerns, staff will have an internal decision-making matrix that does, prevent, in an ideal case, something like that from being permitted.
I guess my concern is, I know that we're facing all these challenges, but if you have to increase your capacity in stormwater management, that kind of thing, and you've already have something on the agenda today where you can see the cost of maintenance for stormwater catchment area, we're going to have to look after all of that. And I don't want to exacerbate problems that already exist. So again, if staff are looking at that, will they also look at how many encroachments, say, are on the boulevard, so paving the boulevard, how many on a street will exist, and will they monitor that so there is, so that we're not we're not adding paving, almost on every other house or something like that, so we're not exacerbating the runoff issue?
Through the chair, I think something like that, the context is certainly something that staff will consider. And perhaps the director of planning can speak a little bit further to how that department envisions kind of rolling this out when it comes to something like that. Now, I think we, as staff, we acknowledge that this is something that, there are neighborhoods where every other house, for example, does have an encroachment onto the boulevard. So, comparing that internally, and I think understanding that the goals of council and the intent of this is to not permit the sort of hardscaped pavement of an entire neighborhood. There's reference in the policy to ensuring that the intent of council is upheld by any decision that staff make in terms of permitting an encroachment. So I'm not sure if Director Romaneski has anything he'd like to add to that.
No, I have nothing further to add.
Well, thank you. I guess my concern obviously is the amount of runoff that could potentially happen if we start paving everything. And I think we have to look at that very closely because it's also our responsibility not to put residents at risk. My other question is with respect to, again, the paving of the boulevard. What happens to the boulevard trees? Obviously, staff have looked at that issue as well.
Through the chair, yes. So there is a provision that in the authorization requirements, which need to be adhered to for both simple and complex, that that no encroachment can be within 1 meter of a municipal tree that is less than 20 centimeters in diameter, or 2 meters of a municipal tree that is greater than 20 centimeters. So there are.
And that ensures its survival then?
Yes, through the chair, yes, that is our understanding.
And if it doesn't survive, who replaces it?
Through the chair, I'm going to defer that question to Director Meredith, just as he is a little bit more familiar with our process when it comes to.
Thank you.
Yeah, through the chair to Regional Councilor Dyes. In our operating budget, we do have an annual sort of tree replacement program that really applies to all of our residential streets. So if there was a tree, whether it's the result of an encroachment or not, we do have an operating budget that we do replace municipal street trees. So my thoughts are, if a tree was not to survive, it would fall within our tree replacement program that we fund through our operating budget.
Well, if it's due to an encroachment, I don't think that we should have to bear the cost, the taxpayers bear the cost of tree replacement. We're spending a lot of money and trying to, attempt to increase the tree canopy for obvious reasons. So, that's a real concern because we've lost whole street trees on Love Crescent when we had the ice storm. And we know, how devastating that is. Not that that's going to happen on a mass scale, but there is a cost associated with that, and that could increase that cost to the taxpayers overall. So I think it should be looked at.
If I can just add to that as well, obviously our forestry staff is going to be part of the review process for any application that's made. So our forestry staff is going to be reviewing and understand best management practices for a complex or a simple application in terms of what's required from a tree preservation standpoint. So I know our forestry section is going to ensure that the appropriate mechanisms are in place. I guess one thing long-term you don't know is you can be several years before understanding the damage or sort of the health of a tree. So it's going to be difficult to directly relate boulevard works to the health of a tree, and it's something, depending on the age, it could not show itself for 5+ years. So it's always a difficult one to sort of directly attribute to anything specifically, which is why we typically do it through our operating budget. But as I said, our forestry staff has been involved through this process, and they'll be involved as part of the review, and we'll ensure that we're maximizing the potential to retain the health of the trees along our municipal boulevards.
Thank you, Mr. Meredith. And just one last question, Mr. Chair. Thank you for your patience. So on the easements on these boulevards, you've got Bell, Rogers, or you've got the region has infrastructure there, the town might have. You've got your lexicon, so your electricity hookups. And I know there in some places they have, I don't know if it's a connection for all of these, because I have one of those places. So my boulevard has been dug up many times. And so I don't know how you're going to get this across to the owners that this could happen. And if they have, who's responsible for removing that infrastructure when we need access to the infrastructure?
Through the chair, right now, the way that staff are recommending this is that it would be in the event that the town, for example, needed to go into a boulevard and deal with something that is underground, it would be the removal would be at the expense of the owner, and that the town's replacement would be to sod or to the original materials, which would be grass and asphalt for the boulevard or for the apron, sorry. So that would be right now, and that will be explicitly outlined in the bylaw that does come forward to and is included in the policy. That will just make residents aware that at any point in time, the boulevard can be dug up and replaced just to the original materials prior to the alteration.
Well, hard landscaping is expensive. And I got to say, that doesn't work because I can tell you when a Lexicon put new cables underground on my street, when they pull the old cables out, anybody with interlocking brick, it automatically sinks. And, or even if they're doing repairs on the road and they've had to go onto your apron and you have a different kind of, it's not just asphalt, then it needs to be repaired, and we don't repair it back to its normal state. And people get very, very upset about that because there is a cost associated with that. And I know you tell them, but I had many, many calls over the years for just that issue. You know, they've come to do some work on my street. They dug up the end of the driveway for water or for whatever, and you didn't replace it the way it was before. And I know it's not their property, but how are you going to get around this issue? Because I can't, you're not going to be able to keep track of all these issues with this one policy is very complicated.
Through the chair, yes, and I think the comments are well taken. Just, I think in general, this will be a big communications exercise that staff will undertake to not only the properties that we currently have, on hold right now, but also to the broader public. And there's a little bit of reference to that in the report, but I think the point to make sure that that is really, a key point of what is communicated to residents, both, initially when we do the push as well as on moving forward on an ongoing basis. I think that will be a very important part of how we communicate that to residents. And I think right now, just for clarity's sake, and perhaps our friends in planning might have some more insights into this than I do. But in the current and under the way we currently do things, if we need to get into a boulevard and get underneath an apron, for example, of a driveway, I believe right now that is something that if you already have that work done, we already don't pay or compensate to fix that. So right now, I think there is this general understanding, or at least maybe not understanding by residents, but it is current practice that we do not cover the costs of replacing that alteration. So it would not be a departure from that perspective, but acknowledging that once folks enter into an agreement and we do sort of begin permitting these changes, that there may be an expectation by residents. So it will really need to be a communications exercise for staff for sure.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you for your insight. Next up, we have Regional Councilor Marilyn Crawford.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm not really sure who to direct this to. Probably the bylaw manager, Derek Hannon. So this is this is going to be a bylaw going forward. What happens now if we get residents complaining to us about already existing driveways that are outside of the 250 that are on hold right now? We know there's hundreds of thousands of driveways that have been widened that have gone way outside of the bylaw restrictions on the current restrictions. So what happens now when we get a complaint?
Through the chair. So the process that'll happen now is between the boulevard tree bylaw and our current road occupancy bylaw will both be adjusted to take the provisions that are outlined in the policy now and make that standard practice. Anybody found not in compliance with the existing bylaw, we would handle as a complaint and go deal with them directly, the same as we would deal with them a year ago. It would be a violation of the road occupancy bylaw. We would start the complaint process and give them an opportunity to get into compliance with the bylaw or get into an agreement to be able to allow to extend beyond what the initial permissions are.
And the 250 driveways that are on hold currently, as I understand it from the mayor, you're going to be going through those and separating between complex and simple?
Correct. So staff have intentions on sending out individual letters to all the homeowners and telling them what they need to do on their properties to get into compliance with the new road occupancy standards, or who to contact to get into a complex agreement.
The tree ring thing, I know that is not new, correct?
It is new. Currently, our existing road occupancy bylaw does not allow tree rings. The new road occupancy will allow a tree ring up to, I believe it's 15 centimeters in height.
Okay, sorry. I thought that was an already existing bylaw, because I thought I had heard something about that. Anyway, okay, thank you. I appreciate the work. I'm happy to support this.
Thank you, Regional Councilor Crawford. Are there any other questions on this item? I have just two quick ones. I don't know if this maybe goes to communications. I just don't want to saddle a bylaw with a lot of extra work, meaning income properties. I don't want this to be an indication to residents that everybody can make a basement apartment now and stick that third car in the driveway. So that's just something that I'm concerned about. It's something that residents have brought up to me. Obviously, that's got to be done right, and it's a completely different process than what we're speaking of today. But I don't want residents to think that it's some sort of green light to just do that arbitrarily. So I don't know if communications is going to be sort of bringing this to the attention of residents, or are we going to be laying low on this and just take it by case basis? Can somebody speak to that? And I'm speaking to the overall residential boulevard encroachment new rules.
In relation to the accessory apartment requiring an additional parking space, staff have worked extremely hard, not just in the boulevard, but also in the proposed zoning changes for the private driveways to ensure that any provisions that are extended do not count as a legal parking space on the property.
Great.
They'll be required to meet the standards without any provisions that we allow people on the boulevards or their private driveways.
Okay, I guess we can move on. If there are no other questions, then we can move on to, do we need, Mr. Clerk, just direct me, I'm blanking here.
You will need a motion to approve the recommendations as amended.
Okay, as he said,
we voted on the amendment, point of order?
We did. We did vote on the amendment and it passed.
Okay, I think I stepped away.
No, it passed. And we have a Regional Councilor Sterling Lee motioning, and he, all in favor for 4.1 residential boulevard encroachments. Thank you so much. That passes unanimously. 4.2 was already passed. And now we are on to 4.3, the standing by insurance renewal. And it was pulled, 4.3 was pulled by Councilor Bauer. Councilor Bauer, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I just have one quick question. It was about the indication of 64 claims being closed in 2019. And if possible, could we be provided with sort of a breakdown of those claims? How many were declined? How many were settled? How much did it cost as a payout value? And is that a lot of claims compared to the other members in the MIP group? Please and thank you.
I can answer. Yes, thank you. Through you, Chair. I can answer that. So thank you for the question, Councilor Bauer. So of the 64 claims that were closed in 2019, 27 claims were denied, 10 claims were dismissed in court, 9 claims, there was actually no claim made. So the claimant reported it, but did not pursue the claim. And then 18 claims were settled. So these are all the claims that were closed in 2019. So some of these claims actually, they don't happen and are closed within the current year. So we have claims that actually date back to 2012. That they are open for a significant amount of time. The total payout of these claims was about $518,000. And as far as whether this is a high number of claims, it's really difficult to compare the various municipalities or the municipalities that are within the pool because it is dependent on several factors, including the population, number of vehicles we have, insured assets, risk management programs, etc. So smaller municipalities like Brock or Uxbridge would have fewer claims, whereas a region would have more claims in HX. So it's really difficult. It's not an apples to apples comparison.
Thank you very much, Director. I just was curious about that. That's it for me, Chair.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Director. Are there any other questions on item 4.3 and our consent agenda? If not, we need a mover for that. We're moved by Councilor Khan. All in favor? That motion passes. Sorry, that item passes. We are now on to item number 4.4, 2021 user fees and charges. And I believe we have Mayor Collier who has pulled this. Sir, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. I did send an amendment to the clerk. Alex, did you get that?
Yes, through you, Mr. Chair, I did. I can bring that up on screen if you like.
Please, thank you. Rather than ask questions, I'll just put the amendment up and then speak to it. In first item 1, the only difference in recommendation is I've changed from 2021 to 2022, meaning any increase in fees would start in 2 Januaries, not this January. And then item 2, that each year thereafter that should be commencing on January 1st, 2022, the recommended fee schedule for all departments be automatically incremented or indexed in accordance with the MPI, unless modified by council. And I'll just speak to it quickly. We have, obviously, when this report was first done for the MPI, I believe it was back in June, we had all, as part of our strategic plan, directed the CAO and staff to look for other forms of revenue, alternate revenue streams outside of taxes. And I support everything in this report, except for the commencing date, because then COVID hit. And now we're in a situation where I know there's a motion coming forward regarding council pay, which I completely support, in freezing. I don't know if there's a way that we can look at other areas in the town that we can maintain for now. But right now, with so many people struggling and people out of work and looking at cuts here and there, I just think it's not the right time. And this is odd that I'm saying this, but it's just not the right time to be increasing our user fees, I don't believe. And that's why but at the same time, I don't want us to get into this every year where we go through them line by line. I agree wholeheartedly with the MPI process. Slightly different than the CPI, which many people, as we all know, when tax time comes, and if the tax increase is any different than what the consumer price index is, people complain and think it should be the CPI, not realizing perhaps that the CPI isn't applicable when it comes to municipal taxes. So using the MPI, I think, takes the guesswork out of it. That way staff can work on determining what that is, and then it just applies across the board and things are just incremented automatically. So I would just ask for support in deferring. I understand staff may have already been factoring some of these potential increases into next year's budget. And I think Councillor Khan is a budget chair. I'm sorry, it might make things a little bit more difficult for next year in doing this, but I think it is the right thing to do in tightening our belts and not bringing in any increases until we get through this COVID and get more back to the new normal. And I'll leave it there. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Mayor Collier. Okay, so are there any questions on this amendment specifically? Regional Councilor Sterling Lee.
Thank you. Through the chair to the mover of the amendment. Point one, absolutely agree wholeheartedly. I think it's a uncertain year to affect rate fees that users might have already considered. Tying it to the MPI though, what if staff, for example, have a very specific reason of keeping the price lower based on, for example, swimming lessons, this is the price point that will maximize the most revenue. I'm afraid that tying it to the MPI might tie these staff hands of manually adjusting some of these fees, which I'm sure they do to fit the most value from.
Yeah, through the chair, I assume that was directed to me. My
Yes.
intent of item 2, the very last 4 words, unless modified by council. So in that case, it would definitely be, and I think there's wording in the report also to that effect, that unless modified by the committee. So that does allow the flexibility. If there is circumstance that does not warrant, then staff are certainly free to report back to the General Government Committee, and council can make that decision.
Oh, okay. Sorry, I get it now. So generally, for example, if staff disagree with the MPI in a specific instance, they would then bring that up to us, and then we would, as council, would approve it. That's the intent of this, correct? Great. No, thank you very much. Thank you, Chair.
Great. Are there any other questions on this amendment? Regional Councilor Marilyn Crawford.
It's not a question, more of a comment. Thank you, Mayor Collier, for bringing this forward. I do think it is the right thing to do, given the circumstances of this year and the kind of unknowns of what we're going to be looking at for the rest of the year. So thank you for bringing this forward, and I wholeheartedly support it.
Great. Anybody else have any questions or comments on this amendment?
Yes, Mr. Chair.
Oh, sorry. Regional Councilor Dies. I couldn't see you, but I see you now.
Thank you. I would like Finance's opinion on the impact of this, because we still have costs that we have incurred for our facilities, whether, it's maintenance, it's mortgages, we still heating, cooling, all of those kinds of things. We have staff working in our facilities now. So what will be the impacts of this moving forward? Or should we be waiting for your input prior to making the decision?
Thank you, Regional Councilor Dies, through the chair. I believe Mr. Harris also has some comments, but the budget this year is going to be very challenging, to say the least. And there are a lot of fees within this report that, although the MPI directive came forward, there are some of the fees and charges that are in this bylaw that are slightly different than the MPI for various reasons, which I think Mr. Harris can speak to. It does become challenging. We do have escalating costs that we will be, monitoring and managing through the budget. So this is one of the avenues that we can use to help mitigate the tax increase for those uncontrollable costs. And by not bringing forward increases to the fees and charges, we likely will not be in line with our comparator municipalities as well.
So a lot of our programs, have not been up and running. So we've lost a lot of revenue there. Yeah, I'm not really comfortable with this, because would this mean that come next, the year that you're going to make the incremental change, would it be a double whammy on the taxpayer perhaps? Because what you put off today, you're going to pay tomorrow.
Through the chair, that is correct. So we would be potentially looking at a much higher increase in the subsequent year.
Thank you. I appreciate your input. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Mayor Collier, did you have a follow-up question on the amendment? Oh, you're still muted, sir.
I just wanted to say a clarification, Chair. Thank you for letting me back in. This motion does not preclude staff, and I recognize there may be instances where a user fee is necessary and doesn't comply with MPI. And there's nothing stopping staff from coming forward through the budget process if we may need to make that amendment. At least that's my understanding. So if there is something in there that by making this amendment would really tie the hands. Say there's and I didn't go through every single one of the 800 odd. I just noticed that 80% of them were increasing. If there is one that would make a real fundamental difference, then absolutely I'm open to considering that as part of the budget process.
Okay. Again, questions on the amendment? Clerk, did you want to speak to what Mayor Collier just said, or?
Yes, if I could, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to provide a few clarifications about the user fee review process and what we go through with each department to review the user fees and how this amendment would affect that process. As part of the review process, so you recall back in the summer, Council adopted a revised user fees policy that established reviewing all of the fees in accordance with the MPI as a general baseline for increases, and that changes outside of the MPI could be justified for different reasons, some of which could be comparator market analysis. If similar fees are found in other municipalities, we generally try to mirror those. It could be in relation to our actual cost of providing the service. If that increases substantially, we may want to raise the fee to accompany that. There are a few technical challenges with this amendment that I think need to be understood. The first, with respect to approving the proposed fee schedule for 2022, staff have done this review this year and have identified already a number of new fees or fees that might be increased by something other than MPI. And in order to get these new fees in place for 2021, we need to have the proposed schedule that's before you approved at this meeting in order to get it in place for 2021. So by deferring the schedule to 2022, those new fees that staff have identified already would also in effect be pushed out. That doesn't preclude council from, say, amending this to not implement the MPI this year and delay that to 2022. But it would be preferable to still engage in the review process and complete it for this year and approve these schedules so that those new fees and those changes outside of MPI can still be captured. With respect to the second part of the amendment, I just want to seek a bit of clarity from council as well that staff would still follow the provisions of the policy and would conduct its annual review of the user fees, which does occur before the budget process and gets approval before the budget process so that finance staff have an opportunity to factor that into their budget calculation. That review process is integral to how we manage the fees because it gives us the opportunity on a fee-by-fee basis to make a determination as to whether the fee is still appropriate for the service that's being provided. So with respect to the general direction to automatically increase fees by the MPI, I think that's somewhat captured in the policy that was adopted because the general direction does specify that the fees will increase by the MPI unless there's another reason for it. But I wouldn't want us as staff to lose the opportunity to engage in this review on an annual basis. It provides us with very valuable information and makes sure that our fees are current and accurate.
Okay. With that said, did you want to reply to that, Mayor Collier, or just leave it as it is? And can I ask, Lisa Bauer is waiting to speak to the amendment, but.
Two things, Chair. I just had a quick run through the fee schedule again. And the things that I saw were new fees. And I, of course, didn't go through all 860 something of them, just I've gone through about the first 8 pages. Look to be things like photocopying and, computer programming. These are for non-FOI, freedom of information related requests. So if somebody makes a request for records are requested in a digital format. So, I mean, these are things that, to me, and I mean no disrespect, are probably not going to be used a lot and really don't seem to be time sensitive, I'll say. The intent of the motion of the amendment is just to not be increasing the user fees now when people can least afford it. I'm fine if the clerk would prefer this to be referred back to staff to consider the proposed amendment and report back at our next GGC if that would be helpful to sort of vet out some of the possible concerns, if that will help.
Through you, Mr. Chair, just to speak to some of the other updates, I know there's some significant ones in planning and development with respect to the minor variance process as well. Other department heads may wish to speak to some of their new fees that are proposed in this year's review. I don't necessarily think it would be of value to refer this back to staff. I think what's needed more so is a direction on whether we'll be implementing the MPI for 2021 or delaying that until 2022. It's still our recommendation that we adopt the fee schedule for 2021 with new fees and non-MPI changes, simply so that we can action those items and implement those new fees where they're recommended by the departments. In the absence of that, referring it back to staff wouldn't give us any particular additional advantage other than to give you a picture of what the fees would look like without MPI factored in, which is easy enough for us to do and have prepared for the October council agenda as the approving bylaw at this time anyway.
So, Mr. Clerk, I'll just leave it up to council. The amendment's on the floor. If somebody wants to refer it so the clerk can do that, that's fine. But I think we should still go ahead. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Collier. Next up is on the amendment, questions on the amendments is Councilor Bauer.
Thank you, Chair. My original question on the amendment has been answered, but if I could ask the clerk to repeat, please, what your proposal was, just in your last discussion, what the options that you presented were again, please.
Through you, Mr. Chair, I think it would be staff's preference, and if it's council's desire not to see the MPI implemented for 2021, I think our preferred direction would be to amend these recommendations to revert any MPI adjustment to no change for 2021 and approve the remainder of the schedules as is. I think that would be the preferable outcome that would give staff updated and current fees for 2021 and give council the opportunity to direct staff to delay the implementation of MPI for a year.
Okay. Okay, I think I understand that. Thank you very much.
Regional Councilor Lee has another question on the amendment. Comment?
So through the chair to the director of finance then, so assuming we keep all our rates across the board flat as the amendment is suggesting, can you predict or, budget out what the loss to the town and potential revenues would be?
Through the chair to Regional Councilor Lee, that's pretty difficult at this point. We're just in the onset of preparing the operating budget. I know that this will have an impact moving forward because we will have increased costs and we won't be then therefore offsetting that with any revenue.
Right. So I see Mayor Collier's hand is up. Go ahead, Chair. Thank you.
Mayor Collier, you have another question?
No, I will try and help if I can. That, would it be acceptable to council if I changed item 1 to January 1st, 2021, but such fee schedule not include the MPI, which would leave the fees the same, but would not have the automatic incrementation up, but would not affect the new fees that staff have already put in for whichever reasons based on departments. Would that be helpful to council and to the clerk? Through the MPI?
Mr. Harris?
So what you're saying, sorry if I can ask something, Chair?
Go ahead.
So Mayor Collier, what you've suggested is that any new fees or changes as a result of non-MPI increases be implemented on January 1st, 2021, and everything else would be deferred until 2022.
The MPI increases be deferred till 2022.
Thank you. And I think that's what the clerk had said.
Yeah.
Okay. If that's helpful, I will agree to the rewording of that.
Okay, I believe the amendment's been adjusted, at least wording wise. And Regional Councilor Dyes, you have a comment on the amendment or question?
Just again, a question to finance again, I guess. If an MPI adjustment is made, it's for a reason. Are we not also dependent on those adjustments? Because some of them, they're, an average of maybe 2%. But overall, there's an effect. Sorry.
No, through the chair, you're absolutely correct, Regional Councilor Dyes. The MPI, from my understanding, was brought forward as a requirement because the CPI is not really representative of the costs that municipalities are faced with. So bringing that forward, it is a reflection of what is happening in the economic, in the economy for the municipal governments. By not addressing these in the current year for 2021 does provide some challenges as far as making up the budget for 2021. There is a lot of uncertainty right now around COVID. It's very difficult to predict what will happen, but if there are costs associated with these fees that we don't increase, that increased cost will have to be funded from the tax base.
Thank you. Appreciate your information.
Okay, are there any other questions on the amendment as written? So moved by by Mayor Collier that the recommendation be amended to read as follows: that the recommended fees schedule be approved effective January 1st, 2021, excluding any increases in accordance with the Municipal Price Index MPI, and 2, that each year after commencing on January 1st, 2022, the recommended fees schedule for all departments be automatically incremented in accordance with the Municipal Price Index MPIs, unless modified by council. We have one more question. Regional Councilor Marilyn Crawford.
Thank you. I don't know if my internet went out or I blanked out or something. Can you please explain to me in number 1, the changes that you've made? Are you saying that everything just stays the same now in this report?
No. Is that,
okay, can you explain to my simple brain what just happened there?
Mayor Collier or the clerk?
All of the fees which is 80% of them, that say MPI index next to them will remain at the current year level and not be indexed up as per MPI. So when you look at the, for instance, I'm on page 97 of the report. When I look at Local Planning Appeal Tribunal, it goes from 320 to 328.40, MPI adjustment of 2.63%. That would stay at 320.
Okay.
It would not be adjusted for the MPI for this year.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Regional Councilor Crawford. Okay, if everyone is done asking questions, then on the amendment, moved by.
I had asked, sorry, Mr. Clerk, I'm sorry, Mr. Chair, I had asked the clerk for a recorded vote, please.
Okay, recorded vote on the amendment moved by Mayor Collier. Mr. Clerk.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. On the amendment, on the motion, please state your position in favor or opposed. Mayor Collier.
In favor.
Councilor Bauer.
In favor.
Regional Councilor Crawford.
In favor.
Councilor Dyes.
Opposed.
Councilor Khan.
In favor.
Regional Councilor Lee.
In favor.
Councilor Tyler Morin.
In favor. So that motion passes. We're now back to the actual consent agenda 4.4, and I believe Regional Councilor Sterling Lee had questions on the whole agenda. The floor is yours, sir.
Well, I suppose with the amendment, it kind of changes the frame of my questions, but I'm going to ask them anyways. In general, in previous budget meetings, whether it's budget or user fees, I'll always ask the question to staff, can we make more money? Can we make more money from this somehow? And there are certain, I've been given the response that a municipal government generally should not be profiting off its residents. And I actually agree with that as well. There are certain baseline programs, swimming, skating, that should be offered by every municipality. But there are some things that I just noticed that I feel that we could be making a few dollars from. So I'm just gonna, if council is gonna take a while, I apologize, but I'll try and condense it. So to the fire chief, for example, we have training tower rentals. And so I guess my first question is, how many training towers are there in Durham region? And then follow up is, in Ajax, how many times were they rented in 2020?
Chief Lang, are you on the call? Are you here, sir? I can't see.
Yes, sorry, through the chair. I was having trouble unmuting. I'm sorry, I'm just trying to bring that up, but I can't get out of this screen to bring up the answers. I did email those answers to the counselor. Sorry, this is not working well.
Why don't I come back to the chief then, and I have other questions for other departments. So for example, LIS, to the director of LIS, acting director. Right now, we have a commissioner of oath for non-residents, and there's a fee for that. So I guess my question is, how many times was that used in 2019 and 2020?
Through you, Mr. Chair, I have those numbers here. In 2019, the non-resident fee was charged for 46 out of 523 commissionings that we did. And in 2020, our numbers are obviously much lower because of current conditions. It was 7 out of 168, all of which would have been prior to the declaration of the emergency, as we've shifted that service to residents only for the time being.
So in theory, though, this is non-residents. So again, we wouldn't actually be affecting any of our Ajax residents. Couldn't we raise that to like $35 or $40, for example? And I know it sounds minuscule, but I mean, realistically, I'm talking, in this case, 53 times the difference. That's extra money we could be making to non-residents. And I think the extra dollars, in my guesstimation, is something these non-residents would pay regardless. So what would you say to that?
Through you, Mr. Chair, what I would say is that when you look across Durham region as to what other municipalities charge for Commissioner of Oaths fees, ours is very consistent in terms of what we charge residents. I believe we're the only ones to charge a resident versus a non-resident fee. The challenge with raising the non-resident fee too high is that you create an incentive for people to simply go to a different municipality. And the same is true if we were to raise our base fee for residents as well. It's not something that has to be offered by your home municipality. Our concern would just be that if we were to raise it more, we would probably be losing business at a certain point, because it would become more economically viable for people to simply get that service from their home municipality.
And I don't disagree with that. Yeah, well, absolutely. But there's a certain calculus of just like, what do we think is the most we can get from a non-resident for a commissioner of oath? And same thing as applies, for example, is a marriage cancellation, right? So these are people who've decided not to get married. We charge, it's a $50 fee. Why wouldn't we charge $75 for that? Do you know what I'm saying? Like, I don't think the extra $25 is enough to deter someone from not getting their marriage license from us. But again, should this rare occurrence happen, that it would just impact us, that I feel we could charge more for that. And I'll just follow up with, and the answer ultimately is, oh, we're comparing against our comparators. And I understand that, but I just also think that we have a chance to set our own market for some of these user fees that would be unique to us. And I'm just really curious, because I'm tired of hearing we don't do this because if we do this, we could lose a bit of money. So if I'm wrong, and I could be, we lose maybe $300-400, right? But if I'm right, we can be making $300-400 per fee, per whatever, right? So that I know this amendment passed, so it kind of freezes anything regardless. But it's just I'm imploring staff, I'm imploring CEO Baker to just, let's take a really in-depth look at these fees and figure out which ones can we raise not just by 2.6%, but just from a logical point of view of just like, oh, this one can actually go up 10% because it only affects a small segment, sometimes non-residents, and it doesn't actually impact our tax base and could make us a few extra dollars. The one I will point out is from operations, and it's the dedication for our benches and trees. That is a very finite proposition, right? Like we only have X amount of benches, we can only put X amount of trees, and they're there for until a storm takes them out, I suppose. Why wouldn't we charge more for that? To just have my name on a bench forever, in a sense. Like that seems like a really good opportunity. And I understand like it's a lot of morning residents, right? But I've heard from a few residents actually saying, hey, I don't care what it will cost me. I will pay top dollar to get a waterfront bench. And obviously I think we're out of waterfront benches, but the principle applies of I think we've set a break even amount for our benches and trees, and our director of operations can correct me if I'm wrong, but this is something, because it's a one-time thing and we can never make more money from it ever, we should look into possibly charging more.
Through the chair, I can respond to Regional Councilor Lee. Regional Councilor Lee, you are correct. Both the bench dedication and the tree dedication programs are based on a cost recovery basis. So essentially we're covering our costs. We're not generating or exceeding in terms of revenue generation. When we look at the trees, we do have a tree planting program along the waterfront, plus additional areas along our parks and open space system. The bench dedication is in other parts of the park system. We don't have the bench dedication along the waterfront any longer. One thing I will point out, and where you're correct, although the bench dedication is a cost recovery basis, once those benches are installed within the town, they become municipal assets. So there are future replacement costs, perhaps 5 or 10 years down the road, that the town is responsible sort of from an asset management perspective. So while we are collecting the upfront capital costs and covering those costs, we don't cover the long-term future replacement of those assets. For context purposes, we only had 2 bench dedications in all of last year, and we had 19 tree dedications last year. So that's the context in terms of the numbers of what we've received sort of in 2019.
And thank you for that. And so that's generally my point. And I don't know if it requires an amendment. I don't think I'll put one through, but it's just like, I really would like staff to take a really realistic, holistic view at our fees, and just be like, is like, I understand there's what Pickering Whitby does, but in a microcosm that is Ajax, if we were to raise XYZ a few more dollars, the town benefits from people, a lot of times not residents, and what will we lose from that is really my kind of calculation. My last one, and thank you again for humoring me. I didn't go through the list, but I had a lot. But this goes to the Director of Recreation and Culture. Vendor fees, So a lot of times we go to Canada Day or any other event, any large scale event, and we generally see the same vendors over and over and over. So can we not offer a discount for our first time vendors, like a acquisition, discount of just being like, this is the first time you've ever done business with us. Here's what it's like. We'll give you a 25% discount or whatever. And then going forward, I'm sure they'll see the huge uptake in our events that our team creates. And then we have a new vendor in a sense for life. Have we ever examined that opportunity?
Yes, through the chair to Regional Councilor Lee. So the vendor fees for our special events, the information we got back from staff on that is typically we haven't been receiving any discounts. Typically, we're receiving that type of feedback from existing longtime vendors where they feel that due to their loyalty to the town and showing up in these events year in, year out, event after event, they would prefer a discount for those services and not the opposite. We haven't really had any issues attracting new vendors for these events, so at this time, that's why we've chosen to keep that fee where it is.
Okay. My last point on rec and culture ultimately is just, I started this entire tirade of just saying, I understand the town should be offering a base amount of services, recreational services for its residents at a very discounted rate, right? But look at our skating and swimming fees. We have a senior fee, we have a youth fee, and we have an adult fee. And the delta between the two is 25 cents, if I'm not mistaken, right? Or it's about that. Why don't we just charge a single fee for skating and swimming? Do we honestly feel that that 25-cent barrier for a youth or a senior is enough to encourage more people to swim or skate, or discourage? Like, it just makes more sense if we offer like a $325 fee, like Toronto does, for no matter what your age or your wouldn't that make more sense?
Yeah, through the chair to Regional Councilor Lee. So we have chosen that tiered approach on the fees for those entry level programs, as it's consistent with our municipal comparators. Typically, Pickering, Whitby, Oshawa, all the Lakeshore municipalities have that tiered fee approach. And the reason, as you identified, is we want to try and encourage children to get out as often as possible, as well as to provide some sort of financial respite for seniors who might be on fixed incomes and things like that. Further to that point, though, we also have those fees for the one-off skatings and swims tied to the swim skate memberships, and that's a membership where somebody purchases for either a few months at a time or an annual base to get a discount overall on those services. So those are really the justifications in having that tiered fee for adult and youth.
Fair enough. And finally, like in terms of our most popular classes, is there an opportunity to offer an enhanced tier for these classes? So it's like there's a basic class offered to everyone. Here you can talk to the trainer on off hours or whatever, and you get an extra 15, 20 minutes, and it costs you an extra $100. I just think you can see our fees. We have tons of popular classes that I just think we're not milking the stone dry. And even any service right now has a tiered system. Even Netflix has your, bronze, silver, gold. That I would love to see the town start looking into that mentality of offering a bronze. Bronze is everyone gets it, but offering a silver and gold tier to those willing to pay more for an enhanced service.
Yeah, through the chair to Regional Councilor Lee. So historically, this hasn't been our approach to fitness programming. However, you raise a good point, and this is something that staff are going to take back and look at as we move into future years. Obviously, 2021 isn't going to be the most ideal timing for us to take a look at those fitness programming fees.
Right.
But certainly beyond that, I think there's some merit to what you're suggesting, and staff will take a look at that.
And finally, just through the chair, whether Chief Lang was able to get those numbers?
Yes, through the chair to Councilor Lee, this is Fire Chief. I do have that information now. So go ahead with your questions and I'll answer them.
So just, we offer a training tower rental service to other fire officers, in the province. How many training towers are there in Durham Region?
There's actually, through the chair, there's only one actual training tower currently in Durham Region, and that's in Ajax. There are other training live fire facilities. Example, Oshawa has one. Whitby is in the process of building one, I believe. So there are other facilities, but specifically to the tower that we have, it's just Ajax has that.
So if we're the only game in town, couldn't we be charging a few $100s more? It's a service that we know other fire departments will take advantage of. And we have a competitor building as we speak in Whitby. Isn't now the time to, bring it up to $2,500 or 8 hours a day on weekdays, or $2,900 8-hour days on weekends? That's quite a bit of extra money we would see, would it not be? Do you think the extra few $100s that I'm suggesting would deter fire departments from using our fire tower?
So the answer to that question is a difficult one, because it's quite often not cost that deters other fire departments, a cost of the training tower that deters other departments from using it. It's the costs of staffing and replacement staffing, overtime, and things like that. An example would be if Whitby is sending a crew over to Ajax for the day to train in the live fire tower, then they would be backfilling and replacing overtime for that crew on shift. So in the past, and one of the reasons we were able to get our training tower was showing that tremendous expense of staffing in order to send people other places. I mean, we could send our firefighters out to Wesleyville and places like that where they have the training facilities. But again, it's the backfilling that costs the money. Hence why a lot of departments are going to their own training towers and their own training facilities to alleviate those costs, because those costs drive up very quickly when you have many different crews. For example, on each platoon, you have 4 or 5 different people, crews that have to come over to the tower. Therefore, that's 4 or 5 days per platoon times 4 platoons. You're into 20 plus days. So that's where you get the costs come in. So can we raise the costs? Absolutely. At council's will, it can be whatever we set. What we have done is we have compared our rates to other comparables in the province that have it, whether it's Oakville or Wesleyville, Quinte West, different places that have training facilities and what they charge. We tried to stay similar. The reason we tried to stay similar is, again, because the fire colleges that actually put on the courses that do probably a great deal of the rentals from us are increasing because of the rates that we're keeping. We've gone from in 2019 to from 26 rental days to 2020, we've gone up to 35 rental days booked for this year in the COVID year, where we missed basically the spring of being able to rent the tower. So we've actually increased a fair bit in this year, and we foresee a fair bit more in 2021. But again, they base their, whether they come to us or go somewhere else, because they still have to have all their students show up and do all these things. So they base theirs basically on pricing. So if our prices get too high, they will go somewhere else. They're not into large facilities. They don't have their own, and some of the colleges are actually even talking about building their own to save that money. So there are a lot of variances that come into play when we decide what we believe is a fair rate. But certainly, as I said earlier, if council believes that the rates should be higher, we'll certainly post them higher and go that route. But as I said, there's many factors, excuse me, that determine the whole rental of the tower and what we can offer.
Okay, thank you for that. My point remains the same. I'm not going to put forth any amendments on pricing now because we're freezing them. But it's just, we for fire, the tower, the chief just said, we're the only game in town. Everyone else is building their own version of this, which will devalue ours. So it's like, now's the time we got to strike when the iron's hot. So I'll leave it at that. Hopefully staff has heard, the kind of questions I'm asking. It definitely reflects, I think, what I feel a lot of councilors are feeling right now, of just like, there are certain areas I just think shouldn't just be blanketed with a 2.6% raise. I think there should be some common sense to actually raise those even higher. Thank you, Chair, for indulging me.
Thank you, Regional Councillor Lee. On to Regional Councillor Crawford.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My question is on the towers, still the training towers. Chief, the numbers that you quoted, were they pre-COVID or post-COVID or during COVID? What were those numbers based on?
Through the chair to councillor. Which numbers? You mean the rental days?
Yes, and the amount that we made.
Oh, okay. Yeah, so the rental days for 2019 were set pre-COVID. 2020, we were expecting it to be lower, and we found throughout the end of summer and into the fall and now early winter that we were booked almost solid, so that the rental days surprised us, but it was because they couldn't get their spring rentals in. We have been actively discussions with the schools, with fire services in Durham region. We've had fire services within the region starting to come to our tower, so we are working towards increasing the amount of the rental days and the times that we can rent out the tower. So the factors are built in. As I said, the 2020 is within the COVID restrictions. We did have to unfortunately have it closed for a while, but as I said, it's back open now. But there are restrictions and requirements that everybody has to work under, just like any other workplace. So there, it's come and gone. It's coming and going. We don't know exactly what 2021 is going to bring because we don't know how long this is all going to last. So we're being conservative on what we think the next year's rates or next year's rate of usage will be. Certainly, we're trying to go as high as we can to show that hopefully the reality.
So the numbers you quoted, Regional Councilor Lee, were pre-COVID, correct?
Sorry, for you mean the amount that we charge per day for an 8-hour day?
The revenue, yes.
Yeah. So there wasn't a revenue requested, but the 2,175 for an 8-hour day is current rates. And then what we're recommending for next year is an increase.
Okay. Okay, so how much was your total revenue that we made on do you know those numbers offhand for 2019 total revenue?
No, I don't. Sorry, I can get those numbers for you for 2019.
Yeah.
And I can get you even the 2020 to date numbers of total revenue for the towers. But I do not have it up with me at this point. I would have to get staff to look it up.
Okay, I'm curious, actually, is our Director of Finance, are you able to pull those numbers up? Thanks, Chair. Didn't mean to cut you off.
Through the chair, my internet's kind of spotty. I was just trying to get back onto the system. So I don't have it in front of me right this moment, sorry.
Okay, if you wouldn't mind, that would be great to be able to have that comparator both of 2019 and 2020. I think that Regional Councilor Lee is onto something here, and it seems that we're booked quite solidly, even through the pandemic. So I think that we would like to have those numbers. I don't think you need a motion for that. I think, is that just okay to be requesting that information?
Through the chair, yes. We can get that for you.
What's that, sorry?
That's the fire chief. Through the chair, we can definitely get those numbers for you, and you can see the comparative.
Okay, thanks very much for your help. Thank you, Mr. Chair, for letting me back in.
Thank you, Regional Councilor Crawford. Are there any other questions on the consent agenda number 4.4, 2021 user fees and charges? There being none, can I have a mover for that, please? We'll go with Regional Councilor Lee, moving 4.4. All in favor?
Moving as amended, correct?
Yep.
Moving as amended. I apologize. Then the amendment was moving as amended. 4.4. All in favor? That passes unanimously. Thank you so much. Now, as we moving right along, we're on to item number 4.5, Municipal Elections Contributions Rebate Program Review, Public Consultation Results. And we have Mayor Collier and Regional Councilor Dyes. Mayor Collier, you have the floor, sir.
Thank you, Chair. I'll be very brief. And I'll move the recommendation as stated in the report. This is something that every year, every election we seem to come back to. In the last at least one, so this will be the second time, could be the third, staff have recommended getting rid of this policy. Very few have it, and it's just something, it's been a bit of a bone of contention for many residents for quite some time, because they're actually kind of forced to support candidates they may not want to support through their tax dollars. This was brought forward at the region, was soundly voted down. And just looking at the report where it talks about the 51, 49 or 52, 48% survey response, 75 residents responses out of 128,000 people, and a 52-48 split is very similar to what we did when we did the retail cannabis motion back in January of 2019. Yeah. And being such a close, it really makes it, it just doesn't give any indication either way. So we can't really take that very narrow margin as any real tell, because it's, we all know that people a lot of times don't get involved unless they are, it's in their backyard. So given the fact that it's 52-48, I would suspect that many of the people that voted on this were very much in favor because they were paying attention of the rebate, and even then it was almost an even split. So I don't look at that as telling at all. But I'm glad to see it coming forward. We've looked at it. I hope this is the last time we're going to look at it, and I support the recommendation. Hope we can move forward. Thank you.
Chair, you're on mute.
I apologize. Next question for Regional Councilor Joanne Dice.
So I guess just to the clerk's office, I mean, the survey, some of the questions were pretty close, opposed to having such a policy, and those that weren't. The cost is pretty minimal at 10% of our election campaign budget overall. Has that been pretty consistent over the years?
Through you, Mr. Chair, actually the costs have increased over previous elections, which in our estimation has to do with the rebate rules that were changed after the 2014 election. You may recall we brought a similar report in 2016 that reviewed the program, and council approved both a lower bar for eligibility for rebates as well as a higher maximum rebate amount. And just for example, in the 2010 and 2014 elections, the rebate program cost between $10,000 and $12,000, and we estimated in 2016 when the revisions were brought to the program that we would see costs closer to $20,000, and we came in at about $23,000. So the cost in 2018 is higher than statistically what we've seen in previous elections, but the rules were also much more loose compared to previous elections.
Well, by loose, do you mean, I think they were less complicated with amounts and what you got back. It was pretty complicated at the very beginning. It wasn't straightforward. So we made it much easier in that sense. Is that correct?
That would be a fair statement, yes.
So I think that it has increased is really an indication that, it's working. So if we look at provincial or federal elections, they get a lot of media attention. There's a lot of education there for the electorate. We don't get that really with municipal elections because it's very hard for them to cover all the municipalities in the province at that time. So we really don't have a lot of opportunities to engage the public and get them out to vote. And I see this as one of those programs that can do that. And I think now that you've taken it down to something that's affordable for people, a $20 donation, I think that makes it much more, that's easier for people. For example, a lot of people think that donating to a campaign is $100 or more dollars. They can't do that. But even offering a $20 donation means that person has invested in that candidate and they're going to go out and vote. So you get that engagement, because this was all, I believe, put forward in the beginning to try and get those numbers up, because historically the numbers of people that go out and vote are very, very low. So I think it's important. I also think it's important because it does give more of a level playing field for candidates, because there are financial barriers. So, I don't think people understand that if you were a local councilor, you could not live in Ajax on the salary that you get as a local councilor. So there are things that we have to consider, and it doesn't just work for the councilor. It's for all of the electorate. So everybody has a level playing field there. If they want to make a donation, they can, and they can get their rebate if they live in Ajax. So I think it's really important that we keep this program, because it does make a huge difference. I've had, over the years, some experience with it. It said in the report it was onerous, and yet, we had an efficient way of dealing with that, and it wasn't really a big issue. So I do, though, agree with you that communication is the issue, and educating the public about the program is something that could be, really worked on for the benefit of the program. And I think, obviously not a lot of people know about it, but I think it's a responsibility also of the candidate to promote the program. So if you're using the program, which I think a lot of us did, you should be promoting it as well. So, you know, for all of those reasons, I think this is something that the electorate really benefits from, and so does the candidate, obviously, but it helps promote both areas. I think it's really important. So I hope you'll support it. Thank you.
Thank you, Regional Councillor Dyes. Regional Councillor Lee.
Thank you, Chair. I would be a hypocrite if I agreed with staff recommendation of dissolving this, as I was a new candidate last election and I used it. So, I mean, it would just only be fueling the incumbent advantage for me not to offer this to any future opponent I may or may not have. And so, I just question to the clerk, does it have to be 75%? I mean, why couldn't it just be 50%, for example, up to a maximum of 200? Where do we come up with the 75% number?
Through you, Mr. Chair, there are no requirements within the Municipal Elections Act as to what that formula is. We are entitled to set the ground rules for it. It's mostly a product of history. The program has essentially, after every election, we do a review and determine whether the rules make sense. It is 75% currently, up to a maximum of $225. If council were interested in continuing the program and revising some of those rules, we did make some recommendations near the end of the report as to perhaps lowering the caps at the top end if you plan on keeping the program, just to keep costs relatively contained. But of course, we could explore other calculations or ways of issuing rebates and the maximum amount that would be eligible for it.
Yep, and I understand the mayor's comments of just realistically, it's been twice staff has recommended to get rid of it, and council's always supported it. I just, it did help as a new candidate, without a doubt, that I had a few supporters able to contribute and get a bit of a rebate back and engage my voter base. And I just think it's generally helpful for democracy. So I'm not fully tied to 75%. I think there is some cost saving measures there, but at the end of the day, I think I would have to disagree with the staff and at least work on a phase out program where maybe the next election is the last one we have it. And then after that, no, I don't know what it looks like. But again, as a new candidate who used it, it would be hypocritical of me to not support it now. Thank you.
Regional Councillor Marilyn Crawford.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think that if you actually surveyed a number of our residents, probably a lot of them would say they don't support bike lanes because they don't use them, but they have to pay for them. They don't support the stencils on the lakefront, but they have to pay for them. I think there's a few things probably in our budget that a few of our residents don't use, and they do have to support it. It's not quite the same as this thing, but I will say I've never used it. So for me, it's neither here nor there as if we have it or not. It's my own fault because I guess I get too hung up on the other parts of the election that I've never actually accessed that. But I think of the 7 councillors, I think there's at least 3 that that used, and 2 being new, that used this quite a bit. So I don't know. I think I think that there's merit in looking at the percentage if that's possible. But I don't know. I at first I was like, yeah, it doesn't affect me. But there's a lot of things that that I pay for with my taxes that don't affect me, and I still have to pay my taxes. So I don't think I'm going to agree with this.
Are there any other are you done? Regional Councillor Crawford, you're good. Any other questions on the consent agenda 4.5 as motioned by Mayor Collier? Your motion, and go ahead, sir. Not motion, but you motioned for it.
Sorry, Chair, I had my hand up.
Oh, sorry, Councillor Bauer, I didn't hear you. Do you mind, Mayor Collier, if she goes first, and then we end?
No, I will definitely step aside. Thank you.
Okay, Lisa, go ahead. Sorry, Councillor Bauer.
Thank you. Yes, I would echo that this rebate program was very helpful to me as a new candidate as well. I used it, I promoted it. If I had not run in the election but donated to someone's campaign, I would have also used it for myself as a voter. I think when I read the survey, one comment that I would make is that based on some of the responses, I'm not sure that residents understood the program in the sense that it sounded to me like they thought the candidate was getting the money, that we were getting the rebate, and it was actually the voter. So I think this all goes towards communication and education of the program for sure. I agree with Regional Councilor Lee's comment that maybe we don't look at a 75% rebate. Maybe it's something less, or we use the recommended ratio in the report of a lower cap to the donation amount. But I think the program served its purpose definitely for the 2018 election. So I would support keeping it. Thank you. That's my comment.
Thank you, Councillor Bauer. And the mover, yes, Mayor Collier, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. Just to sort of round it up, and yeah, I've used this in every single election because it's there. Doesn't mean I've supported it, but it's, it's a tool. Some people want it, but to me, if people are going to support you, they're going to support you with or without getting their $25 or $75 back or whatever it is. But just looking at the report from June 2020, only 8 of Ontario's 444 municipalities had a rebate program. 8. That's well under 1%. If this is such a great tool and this is such a, everything we do, we reach out to other municipalities, whether it's our salaries, whether it's our fee structures, whether it's our everything, we reach out to other municipalities and we compare ourselves and we get that information. I guess when it suits our purpose, because, 8 out of 444 isn't a very, very big sample of those that think this is a worthwhile thing to do. Those of us that, just me at the region, remember this coming forward and being shot down big time because people just don't agree with using tax dollars for candidates for funding municipal elections. I mean, you can use it. Great. I used it because it was there. You can't, don't hate the player. Right? But to use that as a reason to keep doing something just because we've always done it in the past, things change. And quite honestly, we just had a very lengthy, almost hour-long discussion about our fees for the next year and recognizing the fact that we're in COVID and we have budget issues. And now we have a report in front of us that staff are telling us for at least the second time that we should be getting rid of this program. And I'm hearing support for it. And it sounds like majority support for it. I don't know. I just ask that everybody ask themselves that same question. Are we serious about cutting costs? Are we serious about cutting staff time so they can spend it on things that need to be done rather than a long sort of protracted policy to like, this is you've got all those forms, they're in triplicate, they've got to go here, there, and everywhere. It's got to go through LIS, finance, everything else. This is not a simple thing. This is something that goes on for months after the election, months. And I think the clerk, I won't ask you, Alex, I won't put you on the spot, but I think I've seen the work that goes into this and it's substantial. And honestly, we did go over budget in the last election for this as well by in excess of 10%. Think about 13% we went over budget in the last election. So I'll leave it at that, but really we got to ask ourselves if we're going to be serious about cutting costs and looking at these things. I'm putting my personal aside. I'm confident that if I run again, I'll be able to get people to support me based on their support for me. I don't think that I'll need an incentive for that. And I think it's been proven just by the turnover in the last election that this really doesn't make much difference whether you use it or not. I'll leave it there. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Regional Councilor Joanne Dice.
Well, just to clarify, tax dollars pay for elections, period. They promote all candidates that sign up, not in the way that you vote for them, but they promote them by putting information out there, setting up all kinds of debates. There's different ways that there's a budget that municipalities support candidates. This was really to engage the community and get them out to vote because we had a really low voter turnout. Now, anytime there's, a huge change on a council, yes, you get more. So it was up last time. But I still think we can do a better job. There is a discrepancy with a level playing field and a financial barrier for people. And I think even if that, somebody wants to give you $20 and that's all they can afford, like I say, they've invested in it, they'll go out and vote. And that's a good thing. They're participating in that democratic right. And we've helped to facilitate that. And that's what we should be doing. It's really hard to get people out to vote. But I think it's important. So if you are of an income bracket that you don't need any help, good for you. But you can't say that there are others that don't need that. And as I said before, I mean, it's for a process to be, democratic. We try to make it easier for people. It's huge stepping up to the plate and running for an election. It's overwhelming for new candidates, but the cost is also overwhelming. So it's not a benefit to the candidate it just helps offset some of those costs because they did step up to the plate to run for office. So it helps with some of those really huge costs. And they do fundraising as well. It's not like you sit back and wait for this big pot of money to roll in. That's not how it works. So I think it's really important. Thank you.
Thank you, Joanne Dyes. Regional Councilor Marilyn Crawford.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The mayor had said something about not wanting to put Alec on our clerk on the spot. I would like to. What was the question you wanted to ask him about? Is it the work that is involved, or I think that's important that we understand that.
Sure, I would be fine hearing how much work is actually involved in administering this policy, Mr. Clerk.
Sorry, Clerk.
No worries. Through you, Mr. Chair. The summary that Mayor Collier gave is fairly accurate. It does take a few months after the election winds down for us to receive all of the rebate forms, cross-reference them with candidates' financial statements and with the forms that were submitted, prepare the necessary checks through finance and distribute those and confirm that they've been received by the individuals who are eligible for them. A lot of the challenge comes in when we have multiple forms that are submitted from the same individual who are donating to multiple candidates, cross-referencing them to make sure that we're not giving out in excess of the maximum eligible amount. Finer details like that. Generally speaking, it requires a moderate amount of effort on our part. Our concern is that if the program were to become very popular in a particular election, it would consume a significant amount of resources. The reason it's been manageable for so long has largely been because despite our efforts, we can't actually seem to get more individuals interested in rebates. And I want to make this point clear for members of the committee. While we did have increased costs in 2018, the number of rebates we issued was, and this is in the report that we brought in the summer, 142, which is consistent with where we were in 2010 and even less than we were in 2006, and reflects a general kind of trend that we've been seeing with the program usage. The reason the cost went up is because we made more donations eligible for larger amounts, not because we had more individuals participating in the program. And the reason that we've recommended discontinuing it has nothing really to do with the philosophical motives for whether you support using taxpayer dollars for a program like this or not. It simply has to do with the fact that despite our efforts over the years, we can't seem to get more candidates and more individuals interested in using it. And that's despite lowering the eligible amount to as low as $20 and increasing the maximum rebate up to $225. So our concern really falls there that we've done everything in our power to try to encourage the use of this program over the years, and it hasn't really borne fruit. And yet we still continue to see increased costs as the average rebate amount increases, and almost all of the rebates wind up going to individuals who give the maximum.
Okay, so with that said, are there any other comments or questions? Councillor Khan.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. So I've listened to everybody on this topic, and I support not carrying on with this. If nobody is using it, hardly anybody is using it, then, and it's a lot of work for our staff, cut it. I mean, I don't agree that it encourages people to take heed in the elections and to come out to vote. I think we made people come out to vote. We worked. This is my first elections, and I worked, and we all worked hard to get it exciting to get our residents engaged. Previously, I don't know why the residents weren't engaged. I think we worked hard and we got a good voters turnout. And if staff says it's not working and it's a waste of time and money, then cut it. So I would fully support this for cutting it. Thank you.
Any other questions or comments in regards to item 4.5? So we will now, sure, yep, go.
If I may offer a suggestion. So we've heard some support from members for this program. The recommendation that's before you is to discontinue it, but if that recommendation were to fail, staff wouldn't have any direction to bring something back. So if members are interested in continuing this program, I might suggest if someone were to refer it back to staff with direction to bring forward a report to continue the program in 2022, that would give us the direction to re-examine the rules and bring it back to you for approval at a later date. Otherwise,
I'd be happy to do that, Mr. Chair.
And would that need a vote? Would it need a majority vote for us to send it back to staff, I believe?
Yes, it would.
So should I ask that vote now? I should ask that question now if we want to send it back.
We have a referral motion on the floor. Point of order, Chair.
Alec?
Yes, if the referral motion is on the floor, then it should be the next item dealt with.
Chronologically. So Regional Councilor Joanne Dyes, are you?
I have no problem referring it back to staff.
So that's a motion on the floor to refer it back to staff, correct, Mr. Clerk?
Yes, that's correct. With direction to prepare for bringing the program back in 2022.
Whoa. Point of order, Chair.
Yeah, aren't we sort of?
We have a resolution on the floor that I have moved on the recommendation. It can be referred back to staff, but I don't think it can be referred back to staff with direction. I mean, I'll of course hear from the clerk, but I mean, there is a motion on the floor.
And wouldn't this motion supersede the motion that's on the floor?
Through you, Mr. Chair.
Would. A referral motion with direction, I don't believe it would.
Through you, Mr. Chair, without overcomplicating it, it would not be beneficial to us to simply have it referred back without an understanding of what council's intention is, whether to have this program implemented in 2022 or not. If it's sufficient for the purposes of fostering this discussion, you could also have a vote on the motion that's been moved and then provide different direction if that were to fail. Either way, there's a path where staff needs some direction, whether to continue this program in 2022 or simply cease any work on it.
Okay, so on the would-be motion that Regional Councilor Joanne Dyes is suggesting or wanting to do, I am a little confused because if we should we just vote on that, and if it passes, then it kind of makes the original 4.5 municipal election contribution program review that you guys set up for us today, that kind of negates that whole thing, does it not?
It just refers it for later.
Defers it for later.
Refer it, so it's just staff will come back to us at a later time with it again.
Right, okay. Again, I don't want to muddy the waters here, but the clerk is asking for direction on this referral though. Correct?
Just point of order, Chair. There is a motion on the floor. If we vote on the motion, which is the recommendation from staff, then it's defeated, then staff have direction. If we have a referral motion, I'm told by the clerk just now that that's not helpful to them because we're referring them to do what? So, I mean, I don't see the point of a referral motion. If this motion fails, then staff have no direction and the program just continues.
Through you, Mr. Chair, if I could clarify that. The contribution rebate program bylaw that's passed after each election is only passed for the coming election. So the bylaw that was passed in 2016 was in effect for 2018 and is now expired. So if council wishes to see the program implemented for 2022, we do need some direction to either pursue that in a future report or adopt it essentially. But a motion to discontinue it that fails leaves us without direction.
Regional Councilor Dyes, you have a question or a comment?
So would the direction then be to defer it back to staff to look at it? There were some concerns about the amount of the rebate increasing, and maybe look at a 50%, that kind of thing, to see if we can keep it in place and then keep the costs down.
Through you, Mr. Chair, yes, we would look at the program rules as part of that referral.
Okay, so should we then now, I know I'm the chair, but I'm just asking you, clerk, for some direction here. Should we now vote on Regional Councilor Dyes's motion?
If there are no further questions, then yes.
Are there any questions on the motion that Regional Councilor Dyes is putting forth? And can you read that motion, clerk, or Regional Councilor Dyes? So this is the amendment to the motion that we have on the floor. Sorry,
Point of order, Chair, it's a referral, not an amendment.
A referral, okay. Can you speak to it, clerk, just so we know exactly what we're voting on?
Yes, thank you. Through you, Mr. Chair, it would be a motion to refer the matter back to staff for further examination of introducing the contribution rebate program in 2022 and a review of the rules of the program.
Okay, so that being said, all in favor?
Point of order, Chair. Isn't that what this report in front of us is?
That's what I was saying.
I mean, that's exactly what the report in front of us is, my understanding. Municipal Contribution Program Review and the public consultation. We've gone through the public consultation. Staff have done the work. They've come back to us with a recommendation. I think it's up to this council to vote on whether they want to support staff's recommendation or not. I mean, if we keep sending this back again and again, we're just burning up more staff time.
Regional Councilor Dyes, does that speak to what you?
No, not really. This is a recommendation to not go to discontinue the program, but I think it's worthwhile to defer it back and look at how we can adjust it so that it works a little better. Maybe it means more communication. Maybe it means reducing the cost. I don't know, but to let staff have a look at that.
So correct me if I'm wrong.
Most of us used it.
Correct me if I'm wrong, clerk. So if we weren't to do Joanne, Regional Councilor Dyes referral, and we just voted, and then but if it got defeated, then it would do what you're trying to do. Is that right, Ms. Dyes?
Through you, Mr. Chair, if the original motion to discontinue the program were defeated, we would still need some direction from council to bring back a review of how we would introduce the program for 2022. So you can do it as two motions if that's preferable. You can vote on the discontinuation, and if that fails, someone can move a motion directing us to bring back a program review to be introduced in 2022. So we're no longer dealing with the question of whether it should or shouldn't continue. It should continue, but under what conditions?
Okay, well.
Point of order, the referral motion supersedes my motion. So I believe we need to vote on the referral motion. If that is defeated, then we go with the main motion in the report. Is that correct, Mr. Clerk?
That's correct, although the referral could be withdrawn.
Got it.
Okay, so now we are going to vote on Regional Councilor Joanne Dyes's referral motion to send this back to staff. So we're going to vote on that now, correct, clerk?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, so all in favor of the motion to refer this back to staff?
Can we have a recorded vote, please, Chair? It's hard to see the hands.
Thank you. A recorded vote has been called on the referral motion. Please state your position in favor or opposed. Mayor Collier.
No.
Councillor Bauer.
In favor?
Regional Councillor Crawford.
In favor.
Regional Councillor Dyes.
In favor.
Councillor Khan.
Opposed.
Regional Councillor Lee.
In favor.
Councillor Tyler Morin.
Opposed. So with that being said, that motion passes, I believe, 4-3. Are you there, clerk?
Yes, that matter is now done.
Okay, so now back to the original.
No, it's
consent. Oh, so now we
On to
just.
the next one.
So we're now moving on. 4.5 has been referred. Okay. Excuse me for my slight confusion. We are on to 4.6, contract award delivery of winter control systems. And we have questions from Mayor Collier.
Thank you, Chair. And I'll just be very brief on this. I just, through you to Mr. Meredith, given that the numbers seem to be rising and we may have to be going backwards as far as our facilities go, I just wonder if we are developing contingency plan to, last time we redeployed staff while we were in phase 1 and parts of phase 2. Are we looking at a similar redeployment, and could that be applied possibly to winter control?
Through the chair to Mayor Collier, that's something that we continue to monitor on a sort of twice a week basis through our MECG meetings, our emergency control group. And once those discussions have taken place about sort of the future openings and support for a range of community facilities and uses and programs down the road, we will look at, I guess, the role and the opportunities for staff. Whether it is a redeployment or not, I don't know at this point in time. Those are discussions that will take place amongst the MECG group. If that is a scenario that the MECG feels is appropriate, there are services that we could look to support in that regard.
Okay, thank you. And just looking at the recommendations, I'm used to seeing a contract award, and then usually I'm used to seeing a potential for 3-year renewal, but this is a 9-year renewal, which I find is a long time. Can you just speak to that, why this is such a long extension?
Well, the term of the contract is, I guess, in a couple of respects, because of the service that we do provide and the capital acquisition costs that are required for the equipment. So when you're looking to make the commitment and understanding that there's $300,000 pieces of equipment times 4 or 5, and there could be $1.5 million to $2 million that the contractor is going to need to invest, they sort of build that. And you get, from a pricing standpoint, the ability to amortize that over a 9 or 10-year period versus a 3 or 4-year period. So you look at it from the business standpoint and the service delivery perspective and the customer service side of the program, in order to get the best and the most competitive price. It's not uncommon for winter control services to be longer than your typical service. And that's primarily related to the costs and in particular the equipment costs.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense.
Just to add to that, that it is dedicated equipment to the town of Ajax service. So it's not something that's being shared amongst other municipalities. This is dedicated equipment. It's new equipment that we require, and it's stored throughout the winter season within the operations yard. So it is directly related to the town of Ajax service delivery program.
All right, that makes a lot of sense. Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, any other questions on item 4.6? There being none, this consent agenda being moved by, who haven't we heard from yet? Mayor Collier. It's fine, you did the last one. Those all in favor? That motion carries. That item is passed. And now we're on to item 4.8, because 4.7, there was no questions. Regional Councilor Dies, the renaming of Graffsby Lane, which I was on that street, just if anybody's interested, just the other day. I didn't realize.
Thank you. It's Grass Bay. So,
Spay.
yeah, it's different pronunciation.
Spee.
So I was at the public open house that we did, I guess, on the internet. And I had a couple of questions to staff about what's involved in actually changing a resident's address from a resident's perspective and from the town's perspective.
So through the chair to Regional Councilor Dyes, from the town's perspective, it seems to be a fairly straightforward process, similar to what we go through when a street name is first chosen. So we have a number of contacts, everything from mapping providers to utility companies to various departments within the town and beyond at all levels of government that we tend to connect with when we're naming a street. So the process would be quite similar to that. It would be putting out correspondence to those parties so that all are aware of the change in the street name. From the resident's perspective, I think it is quite similar to when a resident just changes their address. They will be responsible for connecting with Service Ontario, for example, to update their identification, as well as any local service providers, everything from banking to insurance, so on and so forth, just to ensure that their particular service providers do have their proper address.
And there are costs associated with that, are there not? So you need a new driver's license, you need this, you need that.
Through the chair, we've looked into this to get a sense of what costs could be, and it seems like at least through the research that I conducted, most and actually all situations there was not a fee associated with this. So even something like Service Ontario, there's not a particular fee for it. And when I looked into a number of different banking organizations and similar type organizations, none seem to have a fee.
Okay, that's good to know. Thank you. So I like I say, I did attend the open house, and there were a few comments there that I felt were inaccurate, and I just wanted to check with you if that was the case, because they weren't corrected at the time. And part of, I felt, or what the purpose of the open house was to help educate, our residents about the history. So while we know that the Grass Bay was scuttled by the captain, it was stated that it was just to save the lives of his men only. But if I remember correctly, wasn't that an order that was given to the captain of the Grass Bay by the Nazis to continue fighting to the very end, even though he kind of knew it was ended? Is that correct? Do you know that?
So through the chair, when it comes to the historical account, I'm definitely not an expert on that. I have seen a number of sources that do reflect the history as you just stated. However, as I'm aware, and I'm sure you're aware as well, there are conflicting accounts that get brought up. Whether or not those have actually been verified through any sources, I'm unsure of that. But with anything of this nature, any sort of, historical accounts, there tend to be conflicting stories at times. And I do believe the information that we've seen and that we've had access to would support your claims. But it's always sort of difficult to step up and verify 100% that someone else's claims are inaccurate.
Okay. So basically, we went through a process when the town was being incorporated. They went through, I guess, like a contest for naming the town. And this was the name that was chosen. Being the first successful naval battle, it gave a lot of people hope. Is that correct?
Through the chair, yes. So for the naming of the municipality in terms of the name Ajax, yes, that is how that was driven.
So the street naming policy obviously comes from that, where we we've named the streets after those ships that fought. And of course, Grass Bay was critical, because if we hadn't beaten them, we wouldn't have been successful, and it wouldn't be named the town of Ajax. So the first thing I just wanted to speak to a couple of those opinions that might not necessarily be so. It might be another side. And one was, yes, he scuttled the ship to save the sailors on his ship. However, he also saved the lives of all the other sailors on the other 3 ships, because continuing to fight a battle that, there was, the success had already was already done. They'd seen the ways. He couldn't get out of the bay. To go further would have meant many more lives on both sides. So I think we went through a rigorous process in naming this street previously, and we've gone through another process yet again. But previously, we had support from the residents in the area, from the Legion, from the association overseas. And the other thing that was spoken to was the fact that there was a synagogue that is rented space at St. Paul's Church. And I just wanted to verify, because I remember and have spoken to people who knew that, yes, in fact, they were very aware that this street naming was going to happen. They hadn't yet moved in, but they knew they were coming in, and they were consulted on that. So they knew as well. And by no means is this to, champion or to, for us to say that what the Germans did was a good thing. The Nazis were not good. We know that in many, many ways. So we're not applauding them in any way. All we were simply doing is naming the streets after the ships that fought the battle. And I think that's critical. And there's been actually some really good shows lately on the Blitz in Britain. And I think everybody, both by sea and by air, it was interesting that you might want to have a look at that. But I think it's an onerous task for any resident to change all of their information if they still get most of it by mail. I know even not by mail, if you have to phone Visa, you're an hour on the phone, or anybody else. I think for those reasons, again, I mean, the residents are really good. They're very generous, saying whatever they want, I will go with it, even though there was one couple that said, but they prefer not to. I mean, they were very gracious about it, but I think it is an onerous task. And again, we went through a really vigorous process. So to me, it says that process didn't count, and what those residents said in the past didn't count. And I think it does count, because we don't take these things lightly. We did have extensive consultation, and I think we should respect that moving forward. So thank you.
Thank you, Regional Councillor Dyes. Councillor Khan.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I must say that I agree with Regional Councillor Dyes and everything that she said. History is not pretty. I don't believe in erasing history. Without the Grass Bay, we would have had Ajax. And listen, where I came from, my ancestors were taken in a boat, and they died, and they were thrown in the water, and they were taken to a country, and they were lied to and made farmers and maids and butlers. But we still have in that country a ship that says Indian arrival date in Guyana. I understand it's not the prettiest thing. And then I read this, and it says one family. It says one household didn't want it. Then one, like Regional Councillor Dai said, it was an onerous task. And just to have this, and then the rented space from the church, I understand that, but why are they not part of this report as well? I was looking for all that support. So I see a lot of work being done, and I don't see, I also understand that history is history. And I agree with Regional Councillor Dyes, and I would support to leave that as it is. So anyways, that's just my take on that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Khan. Regional Councillor Sterling Lee.
I was not going to speak on this, but now I am. I understand the town of Ajax was built off World War II, and I'm very respectful of that. I cherish that. But no one can ever criticize Ajax of not honoring its history. We have the Bomb Girls Memorial. All our streets are named after ships. We have a heritage front. We absolutely honor our history. It's okay to say that things have evolved, things have changed. Black Lives Matter is a very good example of that. And just say that, yeah, in the grand scheme of things, I understand the Graf Spee was an important part of our naming, but not really. I mean, why don't we name ourselves Montevideo? If we're going to name ourselves anything, name that street that. We don't have to name it after Nazis. And I think it's very easy to gloss over the fact of the atrocities that the Nazis committed and say that, oh, the naming of a street is more important than the 6 million Jews who died, the homosexuals, the Romani, the Polish, countless others. And I think it's okay to just say, we're going to just go away from that and just acknowledge. And if you want to put the Graf Spee, or I think it's there, Graf Spee, excuse me, I keep calling it the Graf Spee. You want to put it at the end of Harwood and put a little plaque there acknowledging that it was there. I'm sure there's something like that now. Great. I have no problem with that. But as a town, we don't have to name our streets, because when you name a street after someone, what we did with all the British soldiers, anyone who's ever served in the town of, on HMS Ajax or any of the ships, that's honoring them. You're saying you deserve to be remembered through all this. We don't, Nazis do not deserve to be remembered, right? I'm not saying we should forget our history, but we should not be honoring a ship just because it was there during a battle of which we are named after. Because by that extension of the logic, we wouldn't have had that war without Adolf Hitler, but I don't see us clamoring to name ourselves Hitler Boulevard. And that's an extreme example, but that's in a sense the rationale being applied right now. Without this, we wouldn't have had this. Who knows, right? But I think right now we can take an opportunity. There are many First Nations we have yet to begin to acknowledge in Durham region, and I'm sure there's a few prominent ones we can name themselves after. We've only begun to look after name them after bomb girls. There's many other historical people who've impacted the town directly that aren't Nazis, right? And we'd be incredibly tone deaf, especially in today's day and age, to just say like, but it was so long ago, and we don't know, the accounts vary. I've read the contrary accounts to Councilor Dyes that say that, Langsdorff was not the best man at times. And yes, he took care of our soldiers, but he was also responsible for how many deaths during the Battle of River Plate. So if our rationale is he could have killed more and should be honored for not killing more, that's not enough for me personally. And that's not enough for a lot of my residents. So I'll leave it at that. I thank the staff for relooking at this, and any individual who lives on this street who's having problems, give me a call. I'll help you set up your accounts with Service Ontario if you need to. But that's how important it is to me that we not honor a Nazi ship. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Regional Councillor Sterling Lee. Regional Councillor Marilyn Crawford.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. For me, I attended the meeting, the open house, and I think there were more of councillors and staff than there were actual people that came, sadly. I think that I really wish that people who had been part of the original naming of this street had come so we could understand the rationale behind it. But I think that I do appreciate our history. I do kind of struggle with this name though. That is, I just wish that more residents had come out to voice the rationale for naming it the way it was named to begin with, so that it would at least help me to understand and better inform myself. But as it stands now, I would have to agree with Regional Councillor Lee.
Mayor Collier. Thank you, Regional Councillor Crawford. Mayor Collier, sir, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. I'll try not to repeat much of what was said. I will comment on Councillor Dye's comment about this went through a stringent process. I do not believe it did. A member of the last council brought this forward as a recommendation to the Heritage Advisory Committee. The Heritage Advisory Committee made a recommendation, and somehow this decision was made in a closed meeting that I was not in attendance at. The only reason I found out about this, I didn't even know the street had been named actually until I started getting emails from people who were very upset about the street. I knew about Langsdorff. Langsdorff, different story, went through I would agree that went through the proper process, but this decision was made by the last council behind closed doors in an in-camera meeting. Since when is a street naming an in-camera item? I suggest that deviates and breaks the, was it Rule 239K, the Municipal Act? I mean, this type of thing to be done properly should be done publicly, not at a closed session of council, and probably with all members there. Because I wasn't there. I've looked at the minutes. So I just wanted to clarify that, because I do not believe this went through the proper consultation process. That being said, I think we have gone through the proper consultation process, and I was also at the meeting. And really, there was, I think, 4 residents. One had technical difficulties and couldn't ask her question. 2 were kind of indifferent, and one said they're happy to change, and one said they'd rather it stay the same. But of 32 houses on that street, you know, a sampling of 4 or 5 out of 32 is again 10%, 11%. This let every member, every homeowner on that street was notified, and only 4 or 5 showed up. And I think that speaks to, if the people on the street felt that this was really important, I'm pretty sure they would have showed up if they were really concerned and really opposed to this. But I can tell you, the people from the Jewish community sure showed up in my inbox. And I got a ton of pushback on this. And it's something I wasn't even aware of until that time. So that's why Councilor Bauer and I brought forward the motion to have this street looked at for changing. We have a policy that's been in place since 1958. That policy specifically says all new streets in the town must be named after personnel that served on the HMS Ajax, Exeter, or Achilles, the 3 Allied ships that defeated Germany's Admiral Graf Spee in the Battle of the River Plate. It doesn't say anything about deviating from the policy. With all respect, it doesn't say anything about Indigenous. It doesn't say anything about other contributors to the town. We have, and I've talked to Councilor Bauer about this, and I absolutely am open to looking at other things that we can do to recognize people that have made great contributions to the town, or the Indigenous members who you know, were on the land well before us. And we're talking about that, and we're looking at some of those things, maybe parks, maybe plaques, maybe some other things. But to me, our streets, this street naming policy is sacred to me. And having attended the Battle of the River Plate 80th anniversary last year in Montevideo, Uruguay, with members of the German Navy, with members of the Uruguay Navy, the Argentinian Navy, New Zealand, and a large contingent of the HMS Ajax River Plate Veterans Association in England, and then my wife and I and the ambassador representing Canada and Ajax. It was a very moving reconciliation. Everybody agrees that harm was done and moving forward, but that's again more in line with, I think, what Councillor Ash was speaking of, having those discussions, and we're doing that with our Indigenous population now, having those discussions, and with the Black Lives Matters people now, having those discussions and looking at how we can move forward. But what everybody I've talked to at that reunion and everybody I've talked to outside of there is just blown away with the significance of the street naming policy that we have to recognize those that fought at the battle and served on HMS Ajax. And I know that a large number of the River Plate Veterans Association are coming over next August. They're planning to, again, for a number of street namings. We've got people like Peter Danks, who's 84. He might be 85 now. He was 84 in Montevideo last year. I want to have these street namings for these veterans while they're alive, if we can. You know, and I think it is a terrible idea to be bumping some of these deserving members for other reasons when we have this long-standing.
Oh.
So, what?
Okay. No,
Stand by.
Kind of twigged on.
So, well, when you have your turn, I didn't interrupt you, Councillor Dice. So
I didn't mean to. I thought it was.
Okay, for those reasons, I mean, it just, to me, this is not the time to be doing this. It was, to me, a mistake that I think we need to correct. Um, and add to that the location. I mean, we could not have possibly had a worse location for this street right next to the synagogue. I mean, that is an oversight that I mean, we need to fix. So for those reasons, I do support the staff recommendation. I think we've gone through the proper policy. We are using the name that is at the top of the list in the priority list, which is the proper thing. And I'm all for looking at other ways that we can recognize those others that have made significant contributions to our town. I'm not talking about the civic awards, which we already have. I'm talking about other different things that we can do to recognize the significance. Things like we did last year in naming Bill Parrish Memorial Way down at the waterfront, things like that. So, but I think that's a talk for another day. And that's all I'll say on this. I will gladly support the recommendation, Mr. Chair. And if nobody's moved it yet, I will move it. And given the significance, I will call for a recorded vote, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Collier. On to Councilor Bauer. Do you still have a comment? And I will get to you, Regional Councilor Dies, for a second.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I do. I just wanted to comment. Thank you for all of this conversation and dialogue, my colleagues. This is obviously a very important topic and one that we all seem to be passionate about. I won't repeat, Mayor Collier and I put forth a motion, and for the reasons, that have already been stated. I will just comment about maybe some of the attendance at the open house. So when I did receive quite a few emails, phone calls, and text messages about the Graphs Bay naming, and from people who were opposed to it. They were residents in our community in Ward 3, so who passed by the sign, who heard about it, who perhaps attended the church. So the invitation, I believe, only went to the homeowners on Graphs Bay Lane, rightfully so. Of course, it's their street, but I believe that I don't want to negate the passion of the other residents in the community who felt strongly about this and brought it forward. And I just want to make a comment about the Heritage Advisory Committee. I wasn't part of council when the decision was initially made, but I was part of the Heritage Advisory Committee when this came back. And we talked about it at length, and there was only one member of the current advisory committee who was opposed to having the name changed. Everybody else was in support. There's a member on the committee, a couple of them, I believe, who are members of the church. And the term that was used was, this would be the happiest thing we could do by looking at renaming the street. So I just wanted to make those comments. And I really appreciate this dialogue. Thank you. And I will also be supporting this recommendation.
Thank you, Councilor Bauer. Regional Councilor Dies, do you have another comment or question?
Sorry, just quickly. Of course, it's important to honor those veterans that are coming from overseas and to be able to do that while they're here. And I feel that's really important too. And there's got to be a way we can do that. This street's already been named. People are living there. They have to go through the whole change of address thing again. And reviewing the street naming thing, I don't have a problem with it either. And looking at different areas that we've missed, I don't have any of those problems. I just, it is history. It's a fact. That's who we fought in the battle. I don't think that anybody in the Army, anybody who fought in the Navy, anybody who fought in a war wants to kill people. They don't want to be there doing that. It's a horrible, horrible thing. And I think we have to see both sides of it. Sometimes to understand it affects both sides very harshly. So anyway, I look forward to those veterans coming, and surely we can accommodate a street naming for them at that time. So thank you.
Thank you, Regional Councilor Dies. Are there any comments or questions left? I'll just add that I think the distinction is the difference between recognizing and honoring. Recognizing history, looking at, realizing facts, that's sort of one thing, but honoring is a whole other thing. And I think that street naming is an honor. So I think that that's the problem I have with honoring a Nazi. Okay, let's move on to the renaming of Graf Spey Lane, and we're going to have a recorded vote. This is moved by Mayor Collier. Do you wish to speak to it? No, you're just putting your hand up. Okay. Clerk, Mr. Harris.
Thank you. On the resolution before the committee, please state your position in favor or opposed. Mayor Collier.
In favor.
Councilor Bauer.
In favor?
Regional Councilor Crawford.
In favor.
Regional Councilor Dyes.
Opposed.
Councilor Khan.
Opposed.
Regional Councilor Lee.
In favor.
Councilor Tyler Morin.
In favor. Okay.
Is it in order for me to move a 5-minute break?
Yes, I was just going to say that. So we have no discussion items. We're going to be going to the lovely and talented Mr. Greaves. So we'll take 5 minutes before that. Please be prompt. We'll be right back, Councillor Khan.
Mr. Chair, we are live again.
Thank you, Clerk Harris, so much. We're on to presentations. Item 6.1, 2020 traffic calming warrant update. Gentlemen, Director Romanowski, Supervisor Grieve, this is your time.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Clerk, for giving me control. So thank you all for having me this afternoon. I'm here to give a presentation on the traffic calming warrant update that we have completed. I would like to acknowledge that both Brett Sears and Ju Young Kim, who are our consultants from WSP, are on the line as well and are able to answer any questions that we have at the end of this presentation. Oh, sorry, there was a delay. So contents of my presentation, go over a bit of a background on the history of traffic calming in the town of Ajax. I'll give you an overview of the update framework that we completed for this project. I'm going to summarize the new evaluation process, which includes the new 7-step process, as well as highlight the typical traffic calming timeline we hope to achieve through this process, and then finish my presentation with some conclusions and next steps. So as background, the traffic calming warrant is a policy tool that outlines when and how traffic calming should be used in the town of Ajax. The current warrant was approved in 2015 and was actually an update itself from the town's first warrant, which was passed in 2007. Since 2015, we have seen traffic issues become more complex in the town, and therefore there was a need to review our current warrant. As I noted, WSP was retained to help staff undertake this review and propose the updated warrant. So our update framework was really broken down into 3 segments. The first segment was the review of our current 2015 warrant. 3 points I'd like to highlight. In our review, we found the classification of priority versus general locations wasn't achieving the desired impact. We found that in order for a location to be classified as priority, it simply had to meet a speed threshold. We found that this would give undue importance to those locations versus other locations in town. A location could be brought forward simply due to a speed issue and be in a non-residential area, as an example, which we would see as important as well. So that was our first finding. Our second finding was that the overall evaluation process could do with some updating and refining. Specifically, we wanted to emphasize the need for monitoring, which you'll see is a new element of our process. And then finally, we wanted to review the list of available traffic calming measures, specifically in some new technologies and new measures we had seen other municipalities implement over the last 5 years and bring them into our toolbox. Second leg, we looked at best practices and comparable policies in surrounding municipalities. We looked at the policies in both Pickering, Whitby, and Oshawa, as well as others. We found that most of them had similar criteria when doing an evaluation of a proposed traffic calming program or project. We saw that some actually still had a minimum percentage of public support required in order for a project to proceed. We found this interesting as this was actually removed from our policy when it was updated in 2015. We found that this requirement put undue pressure on residents. Our previous requirement was that for a road project to proceed, we would need resident response on that segment of 50%, and 60% of those respondents had to be in favor of the measure. Otherwise, the measure would not be implemented. So we removed that from our policy in our last update. It was interesting to see that some municipalities still had that. But to this third point, we noted that 2 of the 3 were quite dated, and they are actually going through an update themselves. The third pillar of our update was the Ravenscroft Road pilot project. It saw us use the implementation or the testing of the new flexible bollards, which was the new measure we wanted to introduce to our policy. After our initial installation, we actually saw that it wasn't completely effective. So we did do a second installation this past summer, which showed much better results. We felt that this highlighted the importance of monitoring, and you'll see we have integrated that into our new warrant process, and it is an important part for us. So just very quickly, to give you a bit of the data on the Ravenscroft project, you'll see there's the first column is the before traffic calming measure, 4 segments, both their volume and speeds. After the first installation in October of 2019, and after the second installation in September of this year. So we saw the relocation. So the relocation of some of the bollards and the installation of additional bollards did have an impact. 3 of the 4 locations saw lower volume and speeds, and all 4 locations are lower from prior installations or prior to any installations. The testing of the 2020 data saw that all segments would no longer be warranted for traffic calming, and therefore staff are of the opinion that the appropriate traffic calming measures have been implemented on Ravenscroft Road and are working effectively. So our new warrant evaluation process, as I noted, is a 7-step process. I'm going to quickly speak to each of them, but I will go through this quickly. So the first step is the request. We receive requests through a number of different ways, phone calls, emails, discussions, both from residents, councilors, and even from other staff. Staff collects basic information and notifies the requester of the general process. The second step is an initial screening where we look for over a few specific criteria to determine the eligibility of the request. We're looking at the road classification, the grade of the road, its block length, if it's been evaluated previously, and determine if it should proceed into screening, or if it does not pass that initial screening, the request is denied and the requester is notified. Should a segment proceed through, the third step is data collection. As you all know, the town has an extensive data collection program. We collect twice annually in the spring and the fall. Each request is placed on the next available data collection time, and we collect the necessary data in order to complete our evaluation. So moving on to the fourth process is the actual evaluation process. I'm going to just jump ahead and show you. So we look through these 6 criteria. When evaluating a road segment, first and foremost, the road segment must meet those minimum thresholds. So you'll see 3 of the criteria have a minimum threshold. If that segment does not pass that minimum threshold, the request for traffic calming is denied, and then the appropriate requester is notified. They also, if they proceed through that minimum test and into the full evaluation, based on the road classification, a road must achieve a certain score in order to be deemed eligible for traffic calming. And so if a project doesn't meet the minimum score, or the location doesn't pass one of the minimum thresholds, the request is denied and the segment is ineligible for traffic calming for a period of 2 years. Of note on that, so I'll just pop back to my first slide here. You'll see that we note that when the request is denied, it is eligible for rescreening after 2 years. Our previous warrant was a 3-year period of ineligibility. We felt that was too long, and so we've lowered it to a 2-year time period in order to be more responsive. We felt 2 years is an appropriate amount of time where it is plausible that traffic characteristics do change, and therefore the need to retest could exist. So moving on, once we've identified a road segment, is warranted and proceed toward its implementation, we move into step 5, which is the traffic calming design. In this warrant, we have identified both minor and we've identified all of our available traffic calming measures as minor and major adjustment measures. You'll see in the Appendix C of the update, we've broken down each assessment or each measure into those classifications. Those classifications aren't meant to signify the importance of the measure. It's simply the level of effort or the it's the level of effort that's required to implement the adjustments. And so in this process, staff will prepare the design based on the road's characteristics and make a recommendation on the proposed facility. Moving to step 6, that preliminary design is presented to residents and council for consideration. We receive feedback on that proposed design, and that design is then refined, and then a tender is prepared for its implementation. Once implemented, this is the 7th step. This is a new step, which we feel is quite important, is the step of monitoring. So following implementation, the segment will be reevaluated to confirm that the proposed measure is working appropriately. You'll see as the Ravenscroft pilot is a perfect example of how we did that monitoring. So we did an initial installation, we monitored that, saw that it wasn't completely effective, made a slight revision to the measure, and now we are seeing those improved results and are meeting the reduction targets. So we felt that was a perfect example of the importance of monitoring. So we are proposing that all of our roads, all of our traffic calming measures, all of our implementations receive that monitoring to ensure that the investment that the town is making is effective. So that is our 7-step process. So I noted the new traffic calming process timeline. The other element we noted through our current warrant that we staff wanted to improve was the overall timeline. We're seeing that projects were being identified as warranted and ended up on a list for many years. We felt that this wasn't responsive or as responsive as it could be. So we identified this traffic calming process timeline. It is also a way of showing both council and residents what is happening with regards to this program at a given time of the year, or what they can expect to be happening at a given time of the year. And so the intent of the new process is to be able to go from receiving a request to implementing a traffic calming solution where necessary in under 2 years. We will need to ensure that we continue, or council needs to ensure that they continue to provide sufficient budget to the traffic calming program in order to ensure we can maintain this process. And as you'll see in my next presentation, there is a backlog of warranted projects that will need to be worked through and implemented before we can get to our fully realized timeline. But staff are confident that within the next number of years, we can get to this timeline and see a marked improvement in the overall processing timeline of a request. So on to the conclusions and next steps. So the 2020 traffic calming warrant is reflective of best practices in the industry, while also maintaining criteria which are suitable for the town. The update includes a process which enables staff to be more efficient and effective in their evaluation. There is the new emphasis on monitoring, which will ensure the appropriate traffic calming measures are being implemented and that they are effective. And just as a note, the implementation plan for the existing list of warranted projects will be presented in my next presentation. So I'm happy to take any questions you have on the updated traffic calming warrant policy.
Thank you, Mr. Grieve. Much appreciate your presentation, and we will start with Regional Councilor Marilyn Crawford.
Thank you, through you, Mr. Chair, to John Greaves. Thank you for your report. I just want to, I'd like to circle back to the results of the Ravenscroft project. I know that council is probably sick to death of listening to us yak about this, but I'm quite honestly, I'm sick to death of myself talking about it, but it is a reality in my ward, in our ward. So I'm just wondering, there is a noticeable decrease in the traffic on Ravenscroft by 5,000 cars in 1 year. Is there a correlation between the speed dropping and the amount of traffic actually flowing through Ravenscroft? And are we unjustly giving praise to the Bollards when in fact we've actually reduced traffic on the street by 5,000 cars?
So through the chair to Regional Councilor Crawford, the reduction actually isn't 5,000. So if you look at each of these line items, that's a segment in the road. So as an example, the first road north of Folks Drive at first was 3,900 vehicles, and now we're seeing it as 2,700. So that's a reduction of 1,200 vehicles two-way over the day. So the reduction is fairly consistent in those low 12, 13, 1,400 vehicles throughout the road, throughout Ravenscroft.
Sorry, I just took the difference and added them up, but you're talking, but it's still about 1,000 cars, right?
It is. And so that reduction to us shows a slight change in travel pattern. Obviously, through our monitoring, we will ensure that pattern hasn't been simply displaced onto other roads. I can say through monitoring of Delaney, we can actually see Delaney has also lowered. So it is staff's opinion that specifically related to this area, there are more people that are staying on Westney because it is recently completed, construction is done. So people are staying on the type B arterial roads before entering this neighborhood. And so we're seeing lower traffic volumes in all areas in this area within the neighborhood. But it's definitely something we are mindful of, and we want to ensure that any traffic calming measure is not simply diverting people and creating a problem elsewhere. Everything that we've looked at specifically related to this project, it appears that those vehicles are staying out on the type B, the large road arterial roads, and that's quite frankly where they're supposed to be. Those roads are designed to carry high volumes, and now they're residents are only entering into the neighborhood at the exact point where they need to, and we're seeing the road network function properly.
So the difference between the two segments are the cars going and coming back. Is that correct?
It's the two-way traffic. So those so as my example, the north of Folks, the 2,720 we saw in September this year, that is the two-way traffic. So northbound and southbound on Ravenscroft over a 24-hour period. So we're seeing a little more than 100, on average, a little more than 100 vehicles an hour on Ravenscroft Road, north and south at that point.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Thank you for your report.
Moving on to Regional Councilor Sterling Lee.
Thank you, Chair. Mine is just a very simple question. I think you're going to touch on the next report, but you had mentioned that before this new system can kind of come to fruition, we have to clear out the backlog. You said it'll be a couple of years. Can you be a bit more specific? Do you think we'll have this by 2022, 2024? I'm trying to get a grasp of how big the backlog is, because ultimately, if this can't come into really fruition until 3-4 years from now, things might change where this might have to be relooked at again anyways.
So through the chair to Regional Councilor Lee, you're correct. My next presentation will go into much more detail on the backlog. So just as a reference for everyone, right now we have 23 warranted projects on our list. There are 5 of them that are within existing capital projects that are already open. There are 2 that we are proceeding with replacing measures that have worn out. And then there are 15 that are awaiting implementation of measures and identification in an appropriate year. So I'll go into more detail in my next project, but that list is long, and right now staff are anticipating it will be a number of years before this list is completely cleared out.
I'm sorry, and just if you can, just to your best of your ability, pinpoint what does a couple of years, what does many years mean? Like I just want to manage expectations from a council point of view, from a town and resident point of view of we have this brand new system, but is it going to be 4 years, do you imagine, before we're plowed through it?
So through the chair to Regional Councilor Lee, the implementation plan I'm going to present in a moment shows the backlog that is cleared out by approximately 2023. But you also see in my presentation, I make note that there has been room left in the implementation of a given year in order to accommodate what we anticipate will be new segments brought online. So the new segments, we will try to stay to this new timeline, but we also don't want to simply say they get the new timeline while the other ones get held up. So there'll be a bit of a balancing act, I guess, over the next few years where we're implementing as much as we can from the backlog. But if a recently tested segment, presents a need to be brought forward more rapidly, in advance of maybe something that's on the warranted list right now, we've left room in the implementation plan for a given year to accommodate that. If there isn't a new segment, obviously segments that are on the list right now will be brought forward and maybe be able to be implemented sooner than what we anticipate.
Okay, that's helpful. Thank you, Chair. Thank you, John.
Are there any other questions on item 6.1 from any member of council? So, Mr. Grieve, if I may, you know that you and I have spoken at length since the beginning of this council term, and Regional Councilor Marilyn Crawford and I have spoken passionately at dozens of community meetings about various projects on Sims and Linton and Delaney and Ravenscroft and Millington in this case, and McGill. So with that said, in the first 24 months, in the first 2 years, I know that we put the light in at Millington, and I know that we have the Bollards project on Ravenscroft. Is there anything else that you can speak of that we've done? It just seems, and I'm not saying it's your fault, and I always feel like I'm being mean to you, but it just is, it's really, really frustrating. Just the timeline in this. And I guess it's maybe less of a question, more of just a comment. I'm extremely frustrated at the pace of this, but I understand in one way, but another way I don't. I don't know. Do you want to speak to that a little bit? Or maybe that's going to be coming up more in the second portion of your presentation, sir.
So just to respond to your question, Chair, yes, I definitely will go over that more in detail in my next presentation. Just to note, staff were directed to put on hold the implementation of any existing traffic calming measure pending the completion of this warrant.
Right.
So there are projects that were ready to go. We actually went to a public open house in September, in 2019, in order to implement a number of them. Yeah. But the decision was made to put that implementation on hold until this warrant was completed. This warrant update was completed. So definitely some of the backlog has been created in that sense. But also, as I mentioned in this updated policy, just out of happenstance or out of procedure, staff felt the old warrant did lead to this long implementation timeline. And so we feel this new process, this new warrant will let us achieve a much more rapid timeline. And we are excited to start working with that.
Okay, that's great to hear. I mean, just from a resident's point of view, they're really frustrated, but I understand the pending traffic warrant 2020 traffic update. I'm glad you're doing that. Just a quick comment or question on Ravenscroft. Have you guys, or have you considered the fact that thousands of residents are staying home? There's a lot less people driving downtown these days. There's a lot less people leaving Ajax because of COVID-19. A lot of people have been redeployed. We all know friends and family that now I work from home. I'm at home indefinitely. So I just want to make sure, like Marilyn Crawford brought up some good points as well, to make sure that we are truly getting a good read You know, the numbers are there, which I love, but you know, I don't know if it's directly related to the bollards. Did you consider less people traveling from home to, say, Toronto? It seems there's many that are staying home.
So yes, Chair, we definitely did, and that is part and parcel why we didn't collect data until September. Back in early September, there was a significant return to work, return to school that did proceed. I realize we may be heading backwards in that, you know, during or as a result of some recent COVID numbers, but that is in part and parcel why we waited to September to collect the data. But it's definitely something overall town-wide we have been cognizant of, and it's just something we will have to continue to monitor. And as you see in this new process, monitoring is a big part that we will always watch over, you know, the measures that we've installed and ensure that they continue to function. So we will continue to monitor Ravenscroft, and so as I said, all of our measures, and if we need to make an adjustment to the measure that is installed on the road, we will look at that.
Thank you. If you want to move on, if there's no other questions to 6.2, please and thank you.
Chair, before we move on to 6.2, there is a recommendation in the report for item 6.1.
I understand. So the recommendation needs to be voted on.
I'll move the recommendation, Chair.
Thank you. Regional Councilor Sterling Lee. All in favor of the recommendation in 6.1? That motion carries. Now we can move on to 6.2. Correct.
Thank you, Chair and members of Council. This is my second presentation of the day, here to talk to you about the implementation plan for the warranted projects. So like my previous presentation, I gave you a little bit of background. And then go over a review of the existing capital projects that are open related to traffic calming. I will go over the list of warranted segments, present the proposed implementation plan, highlight financial implications, and then finish with project conclusion and next steps. So a little bit of background. So the town of Ajax has recognized the importance of traffic calming for many years. You all are very well aware of that. There is an annual budget allocation for the implementation of traffic calming measures, or there has been in the past, which is helped recognize this importance. The list of warranted projects for traffic calming has grown over the last few years. And as you see the presentation I just gave, the updated traffic warrant provides staff with a more efficient and effective process in the evaluation of traffic calming requests. So the existing capital projects. So the implementation of approved capital projects was put on hold pending the completion of that traffic calming warrant update. As I note here, Ravenscroft did proceed as it was a pilot program, which was incorporated into the update. Prior to 2020, for a given capital budget year, specific projects were listed. In 2020, this approach was changed, and the identification of an overall level of funding was applied to each year, which then allows staff to complete as many projects as possible with the available budget. So this is the list of warranted projects. I've broken them down into two broad categories here, but which I will go over here. So the 5 in red are identified in open capital projects or existing capital projects, ranging from 2017, 2018, and 2019. There are then 17 remaining projects you see in the yellow. There are 2, Seaward Crescent and Emperor Street, which are the replacement of existing measures that had met their effective service life and needed replacing. So those are identified there. So all of the other warranted segments have been tested in the last 2 years, and we have confirmed they are still eligible for traffic calming. They will continue to be tested should their most recent data or the data we evaluated with evaluated them with be older than 2 years. There is one segment which was previously warranted, which has been removed from this list. It is Delaney Drive between Church and Westney. It was tested in both 2018 and 2019, and both years showed that the segment was no longer warranted for traffic calming. It will be retained, and should that evaluation show it is now warranted, it obviously would be added to the list. So just to give you an idea of annual tests that we complete, in 2018, we tested 45 segments. In 2019, we tested 72 segments. And this year, we're on track to test 41 segments. Over the last 2 years, we've seen an average of 3 segments a year be added to our list of warranted projects. And just so you understand, the extents I've listed here are approximate. They're more so in line with where the data was collected. As we proceed to implementation, staff do review the extents and ensure we implement the traffic calming measure across an appropriate length, which is typically, major intersection to major intersection. So these aren't the exact extents. They're simply a reference point at this point. So the proposed implementation plan, I've, in an effort to try to organize it and provide it as clearly as possible, I've listed those warranted segments. I've grouped them into each ward. So all of the Ward 1 segments are listed first, then Ward 2, then Ward 3. They are alphabetized within each given ward, just for your reference. I have then color coded them in trying to identify which capital budget or implementation year they're being allocated to at this point. So all projects identified in 2017 through 2020 will be implemented in 2021. And then when identifying projects beyond, or identifying projects for 2021 and beyond, staff considered multiple factors, including which year was the segment first tested, what ward was the segment in an effort to balance implementation across wards each year where possible, and were there any efficiencies available should one or more segment be implemented together or in connection to other capital projects. There are financial implications related to this implementation plan, which I'll go over in a moment. But you'll see right now the warranted segments are fairly evenly distributed, with 9 segments in Ward 1, 5 segments in Ward 2, and 9 segments in Ward 3. So financial implications, that this is the big portion or big part of the implementation plan. So currently there is significant funding available in already open traffic calming accounts. There's approximately $500,000. It is staff's recommendation that we defer any additional funding request for the 2021 capital budget. And we are proposing that to utilize all available unused funding from these open capital accounts to implement as many projects as possible. So to put it simply, we will implement the green projects and we will implement as many orange projects as possible using the available funding. As a result, or in order to accommodate this or accomplish this, in 2021, staff will bring forward the contract award report indicating all segments that are to be completed with this available funding, and we will require council approval given its estimated value. The implementation of traffic calming projects through the annual capital budget allocation will be reintroduced to the 2022 capital budget. So just a few concluding statements. The 2020, as we all saw today, the 2020 traffic calming warrant establishes a more efficient and effective evaluation process for traffic calming requests. Moving forward, we hope, or staff hope, that the new process will be able to see the evaluation and implementation of warranted measures be accomplished within a 2-year timeline. Before that timeline can be fully realized, we do need to clear out this backlog of warranted projects. And the implementation of those projects has been proposed to be completed over the next few years. those backlogged projects, while also providing the flexibility to implement new segments which are tested in the coming years. So I'm happy to answer any questions council may have on the implementation plan.
Thank you, Mr. Grieve. I think I only saw Mayor Collier. You have the floor, sir.
Thank you, Chair. Through you to Mr. Grieve. Just very simple, just as far as how will you be allocating, how will you choose which of the green and which of the orange go ahead, in what order or priority, please?
So through the chair to Mayor Collier, the green will proceed as it is identified in an open and existing capital project. As for which orange proceed, staff will have to evaluate obviously the available budget and the potential measure for those orange projects with the purpose or the intent to implement as many as possible.
Okay, I guess what I'm asking is, you said the Ravenscroft would be removed. Are you going to start with the 2018 being Old Harwood, McGilda Chapman, and then go to the 19s and then go to the 20s?
Through the chair to Mayor Collier, all of the 20s will be implemented, or all of the green will be implemented next year. It will be a large tender, and it will be all of the green with as many as orange to be implemented next year. It will be a very large project. As I note, it will be coming to council for approval given its size, and we hope to see, upwards of 13, 14 segments implemented next year as we clear out those open capital projects.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Anybody else have questions for Mr. Grieve? If not, then we can move on for the implementation of this.
Excuse me, Chair, I just have one question.
Oh, sorry, I didn't see you. Councilor Bauer, you have the floor.
Thank you. Thank you for this information, Mr. Grieve. It's excellent. And it's, I'm really, really happy to see this and excited. So there's a lot of work involved and a lot of action that's going to be taken. So that's very exciting for all of us. I do have a question about, so this is all for road, implementing about different traffic coming on the road. What about stuff that's just requests, for example, just for signage in certain areas where, for example, in Ward 3, there's an issue about an intersection where there's a lot of U-turns. So I know you're doing study for a no U-turn sign. So is that, if it's something that's strictly like a signage issue, is that part of this project as well or separate?
Through the chair to Councilor Bauer, those types, I guess smaller scale requests, typically with just signage requirements, are dealt kind of on a as needed basis. Specifically related to the one that you're looking at, staff are looking at whether signage needs to be or additional signage needs to be implemented, and those simple type requests that would only require an additional sign or two can typically be accomplished through our annuals or operations annual sign program. So those are dealt with, as those come up. This is to deal with more segment, large segments for traffic calming. The warrant is the process that staff take, and this is the implementation of segments which have been previously tested.
Okay, great, thank you. But those smaller issues would go through the same data collection timeline that you showed earlier, correct?
That's correct. So all those other smaller requests are also part of our annual program where we collect the necessary data, in the most timely manner. Unfortunately, some of those smaller requests have been delayed this year because we did not complete our spring collection as we were right in the early stages of the initial COVID lockdown. So this fall, there is a significant amount of data we are collecting. But yes, typically those smaller requests do also align with one of those collections, and we do the necessary review once we have the available data, if that's what we need.
Great. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Bauer. Councillor Ashmead Khan.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Mr. Grieve, for your hard work on this. So I got a bit lost on page 230 with your colored chart, the table 1, the proposed traffic calming implementation plan. You show me that Ward 1 gets 9, Ward 3 gets 9, and Ward 2 gets 5, and you said it's equal right across the board. Can you explain that, what you mean it's equal across the board if we have 5 and the other 2 wards has 9 each?
Through the chair to Councillor Khan, I simply reference it's relatively equal. I agree 5 is a smaller number than 9, but this is simply the list of segments which have been tested and which have been deemed warranted. It just so happens that these are where they break down. But yeah, my statement was more that they are relatively similar. But absolutely 5 is smaller than 9, but it is simply a reflection of what has been tested and what is warranted.
That's okay. I just wanted to point that out. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Khan. Are there any other questions for Mr. Grieve on item 6.2? Okay, there being none, Mr. Clerk, do we need to move this, or
Yes.
is it just, so we do need to move it. Can I have a mover for this? Councillor Bauer, I don't know if I've had you today. All in favor for item 6.2, traffic calming implementation plan? That passes. Just before we go to the closed session, Mayor Collier, if you would like the floor, you have it, sir.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to make a quick clarification on a statement I made earlier with regards to 4.8. And I looked into that a little bit more, and I did misspeak on one section where I said that the decision was made at an in-camera meeting. The decision was not made at the in-camera meeting, but it was discussed at the in-camera meeting. And I think that's all I can say about it, other than I was not at the in-camera meeting. But I did misspeak when I did say that the decision was made at that May 2017 meeting. So I just wanted to make that clarification, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
Thank you for the clarification, sir. We are now going into a closed session. I need a mover to do so.
Mr. Chair, there is no closed session as part of this meeting.
I said right where it says none, that would have told me that, correct? So now we move on to item number 8, an adjournment. Can we have a mover, Marilyn Crawford, Regional Councilor Marilyn Crawford? All in favor for adjournment? There we go. Thank you so much.